Have you ever walked away from an English conversation feeling angry with yourself? Not because you didn't know English, but because you knew exactly what you wanted to say, and somehow you said almost nothing. The words were there. The ideas were there. The grammar was there. Yet the moment someone looked at you and waited for an answer, your mind went completely blank. Then something strange happened. 5 minutes later, while walking home or lying in bed, the perfect sentence suddenly appeared. Every word, every expression, every idea. You asked yourself the same painful question you've probably asked 100 times before. If I knew the answer, why couldn't I say it when it actually mattered? Most learners believe the problem is vocabulary. Others blame grammar. Some think they need another course, another app, or another year of practice. But what if none of those are the real problem? What if pressure, not English, is stealing your voice? Pressure changes the way your brain retrieves language. It convinces you that every pause is failure, every mistake is embarrassing, and every conversation is an exam you cannot afford to fail. The harder you try to sound perfect, the further your English slips away. That is why this audiobook is different. You are not here to learn hundreds of new words. You are here to unlock the words you already know. Over the next 7 chapters, you will discover why your mind freezes under pressure, how to stay calm when someone is waiting for your answer, how to recover instantly when your mind goes blank, and how to build the kind of confidence that survives interviews, meetings, presentations, and everyday conversations. Because fluency is not about speaking perfectly. Fluency is about staying present when pressure tells you to disappear. If you're ready to stop letting fear erase your English and finally speak with the confidence your knowledge deserves, let's begin. Chapter 1. Your English is not weak. Pressure is blocking it. Before you learn another word, memorize another grammar rule, or search for another speaking technique, you need to understand one truth that has the power to completely change the way you see yourself as an English learner. Most people believe that when they cannot speak English during a real conversation, it means they do not know enough English. That conclusion feels logical because the evidence appears obvious. You open your mouth, nothing comes out. You struggle to find words, and you assume your knowledge is too limited. But what if that conclusion is completely wrong? What if your English is not disappearing because it is missing, but because your brain temporarily loses access to it under pressure? Think about this carefully. Have you ever watched an English movie and understood almost everything? Have you ever listened to a podcast and followed the conversation without much difficulty? Have you ever read an article in English and felt surprisingly comfortable? Have you ever answered practice questions perfectly while studying alone? If your answer is yes, then your brain has already proven something important. You already possess far more English than you are able to use in stressful situations. The problem is not the amount of English you know. The problem is the distance between what your mind knows and what your mouth can produce when another person is waiting for your answer. Imagine a professional pianist who has practiced the same piece of music thousands of times. Alone in the practice room, every note flows naturally. Their fingers move almost automatically because there is no pressure, no audience, and no fear of making a mistake. But imagine placing that same pianist on the world's biggest stage with millions of people watching every movement. Suddenly, their hands begin to shake, their breathing changes, their thoughts become louder than the music. Does that mean they forgot how to play the piano? Of course not. The skill is still there. What changed was not their ability, it was the amount of psychological pressure surrounding that ability. Exactly the same thing happens when you speak English. The moment someone asks you a question, your brain should focus on only one responsibility, communicating your idea. Instead, it suddenly accepts 5 different jobs at the same time. It starts searching for vocabulary, while checking grammar, judging pronunciation, predicting the listener's reaction, worrying about making mistakes, and comparing your English to theirs. Instead of using your mental energy to build a message, your brain wastes that energy, trying to protect your image. Communication becomes secondary, and self-protection becomes the main priority. This explains why your mind often feels perfectly clear before the conversation begins. You may even rehearse possible questions and answers while walking toward the meeting, waiting outside an interview room, or preparing to speak with a foreign colleague. Everything sounds natural inside your head. Your sentences are complete, your vocabulary feels accessible, and your confidence seems real. Then the conversation actually starts. The other person smiles, asks a simple question, and suddenly the sentence you rehearsed disappears as though it never existed. At that moment, many learners panic because they assume they have forgotten English. In reality, they have not forgotten anything. Their attention has simply been stolen by pressure. Pressure is a strange thief because it never steals your knowledge directly. Instead, it steals your attention. The moment your attention shifts from expressing ideas to protecting yourself from embarrassment, your brain begins operating differently. Instead of asking, "What do I want to communicate?" it starts asking, "What if I make a mistake? What if they think my English is bad? What if I cannot remember the next word? What if I pause for too long? What if they lose patience with me?" These questions consume valuable mental resources, leaving very little space for language production. One of the biggest misunderstandings in language learning is the belief that fluent speakers never feel pressure. The truth is very different. Fluent speakers also forget words, they also hesitate, they also lose their train of thought, they also correct themselves in the middle of sentences. The difference is that they do not interpret these moments as disasters. They understand that communication is naturally imperfect, so they continue speaking without allowing one mistake to destroy the entire conversation. Learners, however, often believe that one forgotten word proves they are not ready to speak English. That belief creates even more pressure, and more pressure creates even more hesitation. Before long, a vicious cycle begins repeating itself. Pressure causes mistakes, mistakes create fear, fear creates more pressure, and the next conversation becomes even harder than the last. There is another invisible habit that silently weakens your confidence. Every time you finish a conversation, you replay only your failures. You remember the word you forgot, but you ignore the 20 words you used correctly. You remember the grammar mistake, but you forget that the other person understood your message. You remember the awkward pause, but you completely ignore the fact that you stayed in the conversation instead of giving up. Your brain slowly builds an identity based on these negative memories, and after enough repetition, you begin introducing yourself, even if only inside your own mind, as someone who cannot speak English under pressure. Once that identity forms, your brain starts looking for evidence to prove it right every time you open your mouth. This is why improving your English is not only about learning a language, it is also about changing the story you tell yourself. Every conversation is teaching your brain something. If you finish each conversation by saying, "I embarrassed myself again," your brain becomes even more afraid of the next one. But if you finish by saying, "I stayed in the conversation longer than before," "I understood more than last time," "I recovered after forgetting a word," "I communicated my main idea," your brain begins collecting evidence that speaking English is becoming safer rather than more dangerous. That small mental shift changes the way you approach future conversations. From today onward, I want you to stop saying, "I can't speak English." That sentence is simply not true. Replace it with something far more accurate. "I know more English than pressure allows me to access." Those two sentences may sound similar, but they create completely different futures. The first sentence convinces your brain to give up before the conversation even begins. The second reminds your brain that the knowledge already exists, and that the real challenge is learning to remain calm enough to reach it. This chapter is the foundation of everything that follows, because every powerful transformation begins with the correct diagnosis. If you believe your problem is a lack of vocabulary, you will spend years collecting words that you still cannot access under pressure. If you believe your problem is grammar, you will continue studying rules while remaining afraid to speak. But once you understand that pressure, not ignorance, is standing between your knowledge and your voice, your entire learning strategy changes. You stop chasing endless information and begin training the one skill that truly separates confident speakers from anxious learners: the ability to stay mentally present when the conversation becomes real. Never forget this truth as you continue through this audiobook. Your English has not abandoned you. Your vocabulary has not disappeared. Your grammar has not vanished. Your intelligence has not become weaker. The only thing standing between the English you know and the English you speak is a mind that has been trained to panic instead of communicate. The beautiful truth is that anything the mind has learned can also be retrained. And that journey begins right here, with the simple but life-changing realization that your English is not weak. Pressure is blocking it. Chapter 2. Stop fighting the conversation. Your brain thinks you're in danger. One of the greatest mistakes English learners make has nothing to do with vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, or fluency. It begins long before the first word leaves your mouth. It begins with the silent belief that every English conversation is a test you must pass. The moment you believe you are being tested, your entire body changes. Your breathing becomes faster, your shoulders become tense, your voice loses its natural rhythm, and your mind stops focusing on communication. Instead, it begins searching for evidence that you are about to fail. This happens so quickly that most learners never realize it is happening. yet it controls almost every difficult conversation they experience. Think about the last time someone unexpectedly spoke to you in English. Before you answered, what was the very first thought that entered your mind? Was it, "I wonder what interesting conversation we are about to have"? Probably not. Most learners immediately think something completely different. They think, "I hope I don't make a mistake." They think, "I hope I don't forget my words." They think, "I hope this person doesn't realize my English is weak." Those thoughts seem harmless, but they completely change the purpose of the conversation. You are no longer trying to connect with another human being. You are trying to survive an imaginary examination that exists only inside your own mind. Your brain cannot communicate naturally while it believes it is under attack. This is how the human mind has always worked. Whenever your brain senses danger, it automatically redirects its energy toward protection rather than creativity. Thousands of years ago, this response helped human beings survive real physical threats. Today, your brain often reacts in exactly the same way when the danger is only psychological. It cannot always distinguish between standing in front of a wild animal and standing in front of someone waiting for an English answer. Both situations create uncertainty, and uncertainty activates fear. This explains why your thinking suddenly becomes slower during stressful conversations. It is not because your intelligence disappears, it is because your brain has changed its priority. Instead of helping you express ideas, it begins asking questions that have nothing to do with communication. What if I sound stupid? What if they laugh? What if I use the wrong tense? What if they switch to my native language because they think I'm too slow? What if they lose patience? What if I embarrass myself? Every one of these questions steals a small piece of your attention, and before you realize it, there is very little attention left for speaking itself. Now let me ask you another question. Have you ever noticed that you speak your native language without planning every sentence? You don't stop to analyze every verb. You don't mentally review grammar rules before answering a simple question. You don't worry whether your sentence sounds impressive enough. You simply think about your message, and the words naturally follow. That is because your attention stays on the conversation instead of on yourself. When you speak English, however, your attention often leaves the conversation completely. Instead of listening carefully to the other person, you begin listening to the voice inside your own head. Instead of thinking about your next idea, you begin thinking about your next mistake. Instead of being curious about the discussion, you become obsessed with your performance. This is why many learners leave conversations feeling mentally exhausted. They were not only speaking English, they were also fighting themselves every second. Here is an important lesson that can immediately change the quality of your conversations. Your goal is not to impress people with English. Your goal is to connect with people through English. Those two goals produce completely different speakers. When your goal is to impress, you search for difficult vocabulary instead of clear vocabulary. You delay your answer because you want the perfect sentence. You become disappointed every time your English sounds simple. You judge yourself more harshly than anyone else ever could. When your goal is to connect, everything changes. You stop asking yourself, "How can I sound intelligent?" and begin asking, "How can I make my message easy to understand?" That small shift removes an enormous amount of pressure because communication becomes more important than perfection. Imagine two learners answering the same question. Someone asks, "Why are you learning English?" The first learner immediately begins searching for advanced vocabulary. They want to sound educated, sophisticated, and impressive. They keep changing their sentence inside their head before speaking. After several uncomfortable seconds, they finally produce a complicated answer filled with hesitation and uncertainty. The second learner answers differently. "I want to speak confidently with people from different countries. I know English, but sometimes pressure makes me forget everything. That's why I'm practicing every day." Which answer creates a better conversation? The second one. Not because the grammar is more advanced, not because the vocabulary is more difficult, because it is honest, natural, and easy to understand. Never underestimate the power of simple English spoken with confidence. Some of the world's best communicators do not use complicated language. They use clear language. They focus on helping people understand instead of trying to prove how intelligent they are. Real fluency is not measured by how many advanced words you know. It is measured by how comfortably you can share your thoughts under real conditions. Now let's turn this chapter into practical learning that you can begin using today. From this moment onward, before every English conversation, stop asking yourself, "What if I make a mistake?" Replace that question with, "What message do I want this person to understand?" This immediately moves your attention away from fear and back toward communication. Next, give yourself permission to use the simplest words you know. Many learners believe that simple English makes them sound weak. In reality, simple English often sounds more confident because it allows you to speak smoothly instead of struggling to remember complicated expressions. Clear communication will always leave a stronger impression than difficult vocabulary used with hesitation. Another habit you should develop is listening without preparing your answer at the same time. Most learners begin creating their response before the other person has even finished speaking. They become so busy planning their sentence that they stop listening completely. As a result, they miss important details, become more nervous, and make the conversation harder than it needs to be. Train yourself to listen with complete attention first. Once the other person finishes, take a calm breath and begin with one simple sentence. You do not need the entire answer immediately. One clear sentence is enough to start building momentum. Finally, remember something that confident speakers understand deeply. People are far less interested in judging your English than you imagine. Most people are focused on themselves. They are thinking about their own words, their own opinions, and their own lives. They are not secretly counting your grammar mistakes or measuring your vocabulary. Even when they notice an error, they usually forget it within seconds because the purpose of the conversation is understanding, not evaluation. This realization can free you from years of unnecessary pressure. Every time you enter a conversation believing that everyone is judging you, you create a prison inside your own mind. But the moment you realize that people simply want to understand your message, the prison door begins to open. The lesson of this chapter is one you should carry into every conversation for the rest of your life. English is not a performance. It is not an exam. It is not a competition. It is a bridge between two human beings. The moment you stop trying to prove your English, you finally give your English permission to appear naturally. And that is the moment real confidence begins, not because your language suddenly became perfect, but because your mind finally stopped treating every conversation like a battle it had to win. Chapter 3. Your mind is too busy watching you instead of helping you speak. There is an invisible habit that silently destroys the speaking confidence of millions of English learners every single day, and the most dangerous part is that most people never realize they are doing it. They believe their biggest problem is forgetting vocabulary or making grammar mistakes, but the real problem begins much earlier than that. It begins the moment they start watching themselves instead of focusing on the conversation. This habit is called self-monitoring. And when it becomes excessive, it can turn even an advanced English learner into someone who struggles to answer the simplest question. Imagine that someone asks you, "What do you enjoy doing in your free time?" It is not a difficult question. You have answered it before. You know the vocabulary. You know the grammar. You know exactly what you enjoy doing. But instead of answering naturally, your brain suddenly begins holding a meeting. One part of your mind says, "Use better vocabulary." Another part says, "Don't forget the grammar." Another whispers, "Your pronunciation didn't sound right." Then another voice interrupts, "You're speaking too slowly." Another adds, "They're waiting. Hurry up." Another says, "No, don't hurry. If you rush, you'll make mistakes." Within a few seconds, your mind becomes so crowded that there is almost no space left for the only thing that actually matters, sharing your idea. Now think about how you speak in your native language. Do you analyze every sentence before saying it? Do you stop to wonder whether you should choose one adjective instead of another? Do you mentally check every verb tense before answering your friend? Of course not. Your attention stays on your message because you trust your brain to handle the language automatically. That trust is missing when many people speak English. Instead of trusting what they already know, they try to control every single word consciously. They attempt to become the speaker, the grammar teacher, the pronunciation coach, the vocabulary checker, and the judge all at the same time. It is impossible to perform all those roles without becoming mentally exhausted. Imagine trying to drive a car while constantly looking at every mirror, every gauge, every pedal, every wheel movement, every passing vehicle, and every tiny sound the engine makes. You would become nervous even if you already knew how to drive. Experienced drivers do not consciously think about every movement because those movements have become automatic. Their attention stays on the road. Speaking English works exactly the same way. Your attention should stay on the conversation, not on yourself. Unfortunately, school education often teaches the opposite. From the very beginning, many learners are rewarded for producing perfect answers and punished for making mistakes. Grammar is marked in red. Pronunciation is corrected immediately. Every small error receives attention. Slowly, your brain learns an unhealthy lesson. It begins believing that avoiding mistakes is more important than expressing ideas. This belief follows you for years. Even after your English improves dramatically, the fear remains. You may have enough vocabulary to hold a 30-minute conversation, but your own mind interrupts every sentence before it has the chance to develop. Instead of flowing naturally from one idea to another, your thoughts become trapped inside constant self-correction. Have you ever started a sentence and suddenly stopped halfway because you were unsure whether your grammar was correct? Have you ever changed an easy sentence into a complicated one because you wanted to sound smarter, only to become confused in the middle? Have you ever known the answer but stayed silent because you wanted to wait until you could say it perfectly? These moments have something important in common. You were not struggling with English. You were struggling with permission. You never gave yourself permission to sound imperfect. That is why many learners speak beautifully when practicing alone but become completely different people in front of others. When nobody is listening, there is no judge inside the room. When another person arrives, the judge immediately appears. And the strange thing is this: the judge is almost never the other person. The judge is you. You criticize yourself far more harshly than anyone else ever will. You notice every hesitation. You remember every pronunciation mistake. You replay every awkward pause. You compare your English with speakers who have been using the language for decades. Then you conclude that you are not improving. But imagine recording every conversation you have had over the past year. If you listened carefully, you would probably discover something surprising. Your vocabulary has grown. Your pronunciation has improved. Your listening ability is stronger. Your confidence has increased. You speak longer than you used to. You recover from mistakes faster. The progress is real. The problem is that your inner critic refuses to acknowledge it. It only collects evidence of failure. This is why many talented learners remain stuck for years. Their English continues improving, but their confidence never catches up because their self-image remains frozen in the past. They still see themselves as the nervous beginner they used to be, even though their actual ability has changed dramatically. One of the most powerful habits you can build is learning to separate observation from judgment. Observation says, "I paused for 3 seconds before answering." Judgment says, "I'm terrible at speaking English." Observation says, "I forgot one vocabulary word." Judgment says, "My vocabulary is awful." Observation says, "I used the wrong tense." Judgment says, "I'll never become fluent." Can you see the difference? Observation helps you improve. Judgment destroys your confidence. Every confident speaker in the world observes their performance. Very few successful speakers constantly attack themselves. That difference changes everything. Now let me share something that many learners never realize. During a real conversation, people are not waiting for perfect English. They are waiting for understanding. If your message is clear, most listeners are satisfied. Think about the conversations you have with people whose English is not perfect. Do you spend the entire conversation secretly counting their grammar mistakes? Probably not. You focus on what they are trying to say. You naturally fill in small mistakes because communication matters more than perfection. Other people usually treat your English exactly the same way. They want to understand you. They are not sitting there with an imaginary scorecard deciding whether you deserve to continue speaking. The harshest audience is almost always the one living inside your own mind. That is why today's lesson is not about learning another grammar rule. Today's lesson is about changing your relationship with your own thoughts. From now on, every time you catch yourself thinking, "I hope I don't make a mistake," replace it with, "I want this person to understand my idea." Every time you hear yourself saying, "My English isn't good enough," replace it with, "My message is more important than my perfection." Every time you begin criticizing yourself in the middle of a conversation, gently bring your attention back to the person in front of you. Look at their face. Listen to their words. Become curious about what they are saying instead of becoming obsessed with how you sound. Curiosity is one of the greatest enemies of fear. When you are genuinely interested in another person, there is less room left for anxiety. There is another exercise that can completely transform the way you speak. For the next 7 days, after every English conversation, whether it lasts 30 seconds or 30 minutes, do not ask yourself what you did wrong first. Instead, answer these 3 questions. What did I communicate successfully? What did I do better than last time? What is one small thing I want to improve next time? Notice the order. Success comes first. Growth comes second. Improvement comes third. This trains your brain to recognize progress instead of constantly searching for failure. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The voice of your inner critic becomes quieter. Your attention returns to the conversation. Your sentences begin flowing more naturally. You hesitate less because you stop demanding perfection before speaking. You smile more because conversations stop feeling like battles. Most importantly, you begin trusting yourself. And trust is one of the hidden foundations of fluency. You cannot become a confident speaker while constantly treating yourself like a failing student. You become confident by proving to your own mind, conversation after conversation, that you are capable of communicating even when everything is not perfect. Remember this truth every time you speak English. Your mind has two choices. It can become your greatest coach, encouraging you to continue, helping you recover, and reminding you that progress is built one conversation at a time. Or it can become your harshest critic, interrupting every sentence before it has the chance to live. The voice you choose to strengthen today will become the voice that speaks to you in every conversation tomorrow. Choose wisely, because your English is listening. Chapter 4. Stop chasing perfect English. The conversation is waiting for a human, not a machine. There is one belief that quietly follows almost every English learner from the very first day they begin studying the language, and although it sounds responsible, intelligent, and ambitious, it has destroyed more speaking confidence than almost any grammar mistake ever could. It is the belief that before opening your mouth, every sentence must be correct, every word must be accurate, every pronunciation must sound natural, and every idea must be organized perfectly. At first, this belief feels helpful because you think it pushes you toward excellence. In reality, it creates hesitation, fear, overthinking, and eventually silence. Perfection sounds like a beautiful goal when you are sitting alone with a grammar book. It sounds reasonable while completing exercises where you have unlimited time to think, erase, and rewrite your answers. But real conversations do not work that way. Real conversations are alive. They move quickly. They change direction without warning. People interrupt each other, laugh in the middle of sentences, forget words, restart ideas, change opinions, ask unexpected questions, and sometimes leave thoughts unfinished because the other person already understands what they mean. Real communication has never been perfect. It has always been human. Yet many learners walk into every conversation carrying impossible expectations. Before answering even the simplest question, they expect themselves to sound like someone who has been speaking English naturally for 20 or 30 years. They compare their first attempt with another person's 20th year of experience, and when the comparison feels unfair, they blame themselves instead of questioning the impossible standard they created. Imagine a child learning to ride a bicycle. The child falls many times, loses balance, becomes nervous, and occasionally wants to quit. No sensible parent would stand nearby saying, "You shouldn't make mistakes. You should already ride like a professional cyclist." Everyone understands that balance develops through movement, not before movement. Yet when it comes to English, adults often treat themselves with a level of harshness they would never use with another human being. They expect perfect balance before allowing themselves to move. They wait for complete confidence before speaking. They wait for flawless grammar before joining conversations. They wait for perfect pronunciation before expressing simple ideas. And while they are waiting, life keeps moving. Opportunities pass. Conversations end. Interviews finish. Friendships never begin. Meetings continue without their voice, not because they lacked English, but because they believed they needed perfection before participation. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings in language learning. Perfection is not the path to confidence. Participation is the path to confidence. Every conversation you avoid because you are waiting to become perfect quietly teaches your brain something dangerous. It teaches your brain that speaking English is unsafe. It teaches your brain that silence protects you. It teaches your brain that avoiding conversations is the best way to avoid embarrassment. The problem is that every time you escape from discomfort, your fear becomes stronger. Your brain says, "Good decision, we survived by staying silent." The next conversation becomes even more frightening because your mind has never received evidence that you could have survived by speaking. Now imagine a different learner. This learner still feels nervous. This learner still makes grammar mistakes. This learner still forgets vocabulary. But instead of escaping, they continue speaking. Sometimes they pause. Sometimes they smile and correct themselves. Sometimes they replace a difficult word with a simpler one. Sometimes they say, "Let me explain that differently." Sometimes they laugh at a small mistake and continue. Every one of these moments teaches their brain a completely different lesson. I made a mistake, and nothing terrible happened. I forgot a word, but the conversation continued. My grammar wasn't perfect, but the other person still understood me. I wasn't confident at the beginning, but I became more comfortable after a few minutes. These experiences are far more valuable than another 100 pages of grammar exercises because they retrain the emotional relationship your brain has with speaking English. There is another reason perfection is so dangerous. Perfection steals your attention from the present moment. Instead of listening carefully to what the other person is saying, you begin planning the perfect answer before they have even finished speaking. Instead of responding naturally, you start constructing speeches inside your head. You reject sentence after sentence because none of them sound impressive enough. While you are searching for the ideal response, the conversation has already moved forward without you. Think about how many beautiful opportunities disappear because of this habit. Someone asks for your opinion. You spend 10 seconds trying to create the perfect answer. Someone else speaks first. Your opportunity disappears. Not because your opinion lacked value, but because perfection made you too slow to share it. The truth is that communication rewards clarity far more often than complexity. Imagine that two people answer the same question. The first person uses advanced vocabulary, long complicated sentences, and impressive grammar, but they hesitate constantly because they are afraid of making mistakes. Their answer feels heavy because every sentence sounds like hard work. The second person uses simple vocabulary, clear ideas, and natural pacing. Their grammar is not perfect. They repeat a few words. They even correct themselves once. But their message is easy to understand, and they speak with calm confidence. Who leaves the stronger impression? Almost always, the second speaker. Why? Because people remember confidence. People remember clarity. People remember connection. Very few people walk away from a conversation saying, I really admired the way that person used the past perfect continuous. They remember how comfortable they felt speaking with you. They remember whether you listened. They remember whether you understood them. They remember whether the conversation flowed naturally. Communication has always been about connection before perfection. Now let me give you one of the most powerful mental shifts you can ever make as an English learner. Instead of asking yourself, how can I avoid mistakes? Begin asking, how can I keep the conversation moving? That single question changes your entire approach. When your goal is avoiding mistakes, every pause feels dangerous. When your goal is continuing the conversation, every pause becomes an opportunity to think. When your goal is avoiding mistakes, forgetting one vocabulary word feels like failure. When your goal is continuing the conversation, you simply describe the idea using different words. When your goal is avoiding mistakes, you stop speaking whenever something goes wrong. When your goal is continuing the conversation, you recover and keep moving forward. This is exactly what fluent speakers do every single day. Here is something many learners never notice. Native speakers forget words too. They restart sentences. They interrupt themselves. They say, no, that's not what I meant. Let me explain it another way. I can't remember the word. Give me a second. And nobody thinks they are bad speakers. Because confidence has never meant speaking without mistakes. Confidence means remaining calm while mistakes happen. Now let's turn this chapter into practical learning. From today onward, I want you to give yourself a completely different assignment during every English conversation. Your assignment is not to speak perfectly. Your assignment is not to impress anyone. Your assignment is simply to keep the conversation alive. If you forget a word, explain it. If you make a grammar mistake, continue speaking. If you lose your train of thought, pause for a moment and begin again. If someone speaks too quickly, ask them politely to repeat themselves. These actions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of real communication. Another habit that will completely change your confidence is learning to celebrate completed conversations instead of perfect conversations. After every speaking opportunity, stop asking, was my English perfect? Instead ask, did I stay in the conversation longer than before? Did I express my main idea? Did I recover after making a mistake? Did I avoid giving up? If the answer is yes, then you succeeded, because every conversation completed successfully becomes evidence that your fear is losing its control over you. Little by little, your brain begins collecting a new kind of memory. Not memories of embarrassment, not memories of failure, but memories of survival. I was nervous, but I spoke. I forgot words, but I continued. I made mistakes, but people still understood me. I wasn't perfect, but I connected with another human being. Those memories slowly replace years of fear. One successful conversation becomes two. Two become 10. 10 become 50. One day you suddenly realize something incredible. You are no longer trying to sound fluent. You are simply having conversations. And that is the moment fluency quietly arrives. Always remember this lesson. Perfection is a destination that keeps moving farther away every time you chase it. Communication is available the moment you decide to participate. The world is not waiting for flawless English. The world is waiting to hear your ideas, your experiences, your personality, your humor, your questions, your dreams, and your voice. Do not keep those gifts hidden because of a grammar rule. Do not let one imperfect sentence silence a lifetime of meaningful conversations. Your English does not become powerful the day it becomes perfect. Your English becomes powerful the day you stop allowing perfection to control whether you speak at all. That day can begin today. Chapter 5. Learn to recover when your mind goes blank. Real confidence begins after the mistake. There is a moment in English conversation that almost every learner fears more than anything else. You begin speaking with a clear idea. The first few words come naturally, and for a brief moment you feel that everything is going well. But then, without warning, the next word disappears. Your sentence stops in the middle, your mind becomes silent, and the person in front of you continues waiting. In that small space of silence, pressure grows rapidly. You become aware of your face, your breathing, your unfinished sentence, and the uncomfortable belief that the other person can now see every weakness you have tried to hide. What began as one forgotten word suddenly feels like the collapse of your entire English ability. Many learners believe the real problem in this moment is the missing word. But the missing word is rarely what destroys the conversation. The true problem is the reaction that follows. The moment the word disappears, fear begins creating a second problem that is much larger than the first. Instead of calmly searching for another way to express the idea, you begin judging yourself. You think, why can't I remember this? I know this word. I have studied it many times. The other person must think my English is terrible. I should never have started this sentence. While your brain is trying to retrieve language, another part of your mind is filling the available space with panic, criticism, and embarrassment. This is why a single forgotten word can sometimes erase the rest of the sentence. Your mind is no longer searching only for language. It is also trying to escape the emotional discomfort of being watched. You may begin speaking faster, hoping speed will hide your uncertainty. You may repeat the same unfinished phrase several times. You may suddenly change the subject, give up on the answer, or laugh nervously and say, "My English is not good." Sometimes you may stop speaking completely, even though you still have many useful words available. The conversation does not end because your vocabulary is empty. It ends because pressure convinces you that continuing imperfectly would be more embarrassing than remaining silent. This chapter is designed to replace that belief with one of the most powerful truths in spoken English. The quality of a speaker is not revealed by whether something goes wrong. It is revealed by what the speaker does after something goes wrong. Anyone can sound confident when every word arrives perfectly. Real confidence appears when the sentence breaks, the vocabulary disappears, the question feels unexpected, or the conversation moves in a direction you did not prepare for. That is the moment when recovery becomes more valuable than perfection. A learner who believes confidence means never making mistakes will always remain afraid of speaking because spontaneous communication can never be completely controlled. A learner who understands recovery, however, becomes far more difficult to silence. They know that if one sentence fails, they can build another. If one word disappears, they can describe it. If they misunderstand the question, they can ask for clarification. If they lose their idea, they can pause, return to the main point, and continue. Their confidence does not depend on everything going correctly. It depends on trusting their ability to respond when something goes wrong. Think about how real conversations work in your native language. You sometimes forget a person's name, lose your train of thought, begin a sentence in the wrong way, choose the wrong word, or suddenly realize that your explanation is becoming confusing. You do not immediately conclude that you have lost the ability to speak your own language. You make a small adjustment. You may say, "Wait, let me explain that again," or "I forgot what I was going to say," or "That is not exactly the word I wanted." You trust that the conversation can survive a moment of imperfection because you do not treat every difficulty as evidence of failure. English learners often deny themselves this same freedom. They believe that because English is not their first language, they must hide every hesitation and repair every error before anyone notices. This creates an impossible standard because the effort to hide uncertainty usually makes the uncertainty more visible. your voice changes, your body becomes tense, your sentences become rushed, and the listener can feel that you are no longer focused on the message. Ironically, the attempt to appear completely confident often creates the very nervousness you are trying to hide. The first lesson of recovery is accepting that silence is not an emergency. A pause of 2 or 3 seconds may feel extremely long when you are under pressure, but to the listener, it often feels completely normal. People pause when thinking. They pause when selecting the right word. They pause when the subject is personal, complicated, or unfamiliar. A calm pause can even make you sound more thoughtful because it shows that you are organizing your response instead of speaking carelessly. The problem begins when you interpret the pause as danger. The moment silence appears, you may feel that you must fill it immediately. You begin using random words, repeating yourself, or building a sentence before your idea is ready. This makes your answer less clear and increases the pressure further. Instead of helping yourself, you create more language problems that now require additional recovery. Learning to remain calm for a few seconds can therefore prevent an entire conversation from becoming disorganized. The next time your mind becomes blank, resist the urge to force the perfect word out of your memory. Take a slow breath and use a sentence that protects the conversation while giving your brain time to reconnect with the idea. You can say, "Let me think about how to explain this clearly," or "I know what I mean, but I need a second to find the right words," or "That is a good question and I want to answer it properly." These expressions are not signs that your English is weak. They are practical tools used by capable speakers to manage thinking time. There is a major difference between silent panic and controlled pausing. In silent panic, you disappear from the conversation and become trapped inside your own mind. In controlled pausing, you remain connected to the listener and communicate what is happening. The other person knows you are thinking rather than lost, and your brain receives the extra time it needs without feeling that you have failed. This small communication skill can completely change the emotional experience of speaking under pressure. The second lesson of recovery is understanding that one missing word does not own the entire idea. Many learners become dependent on exact vocabulary. They believe there is only one correct word that can express what they want to say, and if that word disappears, the sentence becomes impossible. But language is flexible. Almost every idea can be explained in several different ways. If you cannot remember the exact word, you can describe its meaning, explain its purpose, mention what it looks like, or replace it with a simpler expression. Imagine that you are speaking about a medical appointment, but the word appointment suddenly disappears. An anxious learner may freeze because they believe the entire sentence depends on that word. A flexible speaker can simply say, "I have a planned meeting with the doctor tomorrow," or "I need to see the doctor tomorrow morning," or "The doctor gave me a time to visit the clinic." None of these alternatives is perfect in every situation, but all of them communicate the message clearly enough for the conversation to continue. Suppose you forget the word receipt while explaining a shopping problem. You can say, "The small paper they gave me after I paid." If you forget the word deadline, you can say, "The final day when the work must be finished." If you forget stapler, you can say, "The small office tool that joins papers together." The ability to describe a missing word is one of the most valuable skills you can develop because it makes your vocabulary larger than the number of exact words you can immediately remember. This is how children communicate when they are still learning their first language. They do not stop speaking because the perfect word is missing. They use the words they already know to move around the gap. Over time, those attempts help them build fluency. Adults often do the opposite. They have far more language knowledge, yet they stop themselves because they believe every idea must be expressed with precise vocabulary. The child uses limited language creatively, while the adult becomes silent inside a larger vocabulary. You can train this recovery skill intentionally. Choose an ordinary object, but do not say its name. Try to explain it using simple English until another person could identify it. Describe a refrigerator without using the word refrigerator. Explain a passport without saying passport. Describe a staircase, a traffic light, a wallet, a calendar, or a microphone. This exercise teaches your brain that communication does not collapse when one word disappears. It also develops flexibility, which is far more useful in real conversations than memorizing isolated vocabulary without learning how to use it. The third lesson is learning how to rebuild a sentence when your original structure becomes too complicated. Many learners begin speaking with an ambitious sentence that contains several ideas, clauses, and grammar structures. They start confidently, but halfway through they lose control of the sentence. They forget where the sentence began, become uncertain about the tense, and try to repair the grammar while continuing to speak. The result becomes increasingly confusing, and the learner finally stops because they no longer know how to finish. This often happens because written English and spoken English are different. In writing, you can build a long sentence, return to the beginning, change the structure, and correct the ending. In conversation, the sentence is already leaving your mouth while you are still deciding where it is going. The safest recovery method is not to rescue the complicated sentence at any cost. It is to stop, simplify, and begin again. You can say, "Let me put that more simply," or "I think I made that more complicated than it needed to be," or "What I really mean is this." These phrases allow you to leave the broken sentence behind without embarrassment. You are not required to complete every sentence you begin. Sometimes the most intelligent speaking decision is recognizing that the structure is no longer helping the listener and replacing it with a clearer version. Imagine that you begin saying, "The main reason why I have been wanting to improve my English, especially because in the future when I will have more opportunities and if I am going to work with international clients." At this point, you may realize that the sentence has become difficult to control. Instead of forcing an ending, pause and say, "Let me explain that more simply. I want to improve my English because I hope to work with international clients in the future." The second version is clearer, easier to manage, and more powerful because the meaning is immediately understandable. A confident speaker does not become emotionally attached to a sentence that is failing. They care more about clarity than about saving the original structure. This is a valuable lesson far beyond English. Sometimes intelligence is not the ability to create something complicated. It is the ability to recognize when simplicity will work better. The fourth lesson of recovery is learning how to respond when you do not understand the other person. Many learners pretend to understand because they are afraid that asking for repetition will expose their weakness. They smile, nod, or answer based on only one or two words they heard. This creates a dangerous situation because the conversation continues on a foundation of confusion. The learner becomes more anxious with every new sentence because they are trying to guess what is happening while also preparing a response. Asking someone to repeat or clarify is not a failure of English. It is a normal communication skill. Native speakers ask each other to repeat things because of background noise, unfamiliar accents, fast speech, unclear pronunciation, complicated ideas, or simple distraction. The difference is that they do not interpret the request as a judgment about their intelligence. You can say, "Could you say that again a little more slowly?" Or, "I understood the first part, but could you repeat the last point?" Or, "When you said that, did you mean that the meeting was canceled or only delayed?" These questions show active listening because you are not simply saying, "I don't understand." You are identifying the exact part that needs clarification and helping the conversation move forward. There is also great power in confirming meaning. Sometimes you understand most of the sentence but remain uncertain about one detail. Instead of guessing, you can say, "So, just to make sure I understood, you want me to send the report before Friday?" This not only protects you from misunderstanding, but also gives you another opportunity to hear the important information in simpler language. Learners often believe fluency means understanding everything immediately, but this is not realistic. Real fluency includes knowing what to do when understanding is incomplete. A person who asks a clear question and receives the correct information is communicating more successfully than someone who pretends to understand and leaves with the wrong message. The fifth lesson is learning how to recover from grammar mistakes without allowing them to destroy your confidence. Many learners notice an error the second it leaves their mouth. They may say, "Yesterday I go to the market," and immediately feel embarrassed because they know the correct form is went. At that moment, they have several choices. They can stop speaking and begin criticizing themselves. They can pretend the error did not happen, or they can make a quick correction and continue. A simple correction sounds like this: "Yesterday I went to the market." Then continue with the story. The correction should be small because the mistake was small. You do not need to apologize repeatedly, explain why you made the error, or restart the entire answer. A quick correction shows awareness and allows the conversation to continue without giving the mistake unnecessary power. There are also moments when correcting yourself is not necessary. If the meaning is clear and the mistake does not create confusion, continuing may be the better choice. Constantly correcting every small error can damage the rhythm of your speech and make you more self-conscious. You need to learn the difference between an error that blocks meaning and an error that simply makes the sentence imperfect. If you say "she go to work every morning," the grammar is incorrect, but the listener understands the message. In a relaxed conversation, you may choose to continue. If you say the meeting is on Thursday, but you meant Tuesday, the error changes important information and should be corrected immediately. Fluency includes knowing when correction helps communication and when it only interrupts it. This is an important shift because many learners treat all mistakes as equally serious. They may react to a missing article with the same level of fear they would use for an error that completely changes the meaning. When every mistake feels dangerous, the brain remains under constant pressure. By learning to evaluate mistakes calmly, you reduce unnecessary correction and protect the natural flow of your speech. The sixth lesson is learning to recover when you lose your train of thought. Sometimes the problem is not vocabulary or grammar. You simply forget what you were trying to say. This can happen in any language, especially when the answer is long, the topic is emotional, or someone interrupts you. Learners often feel embarrassed because they believe losing an idea makes them appear unintelligent. In reality, it is a common human experience. You can say, "I lost my train of thought for a moment," or "I forgot where I was going with that, but my main point is," or "let me return to the original question." These expressions help you reset the direction of the conversation. You do not need to recreate every detail of the missing thought. Return to the main idea and continue from there. One of the best ways to prevent losing your direction is to organize your answer around one central message. Before speaking, ask yourself, what is the one thing I want this person to understand? If you become confused, return to that idea. Everything else is supporting detail. This gives your mind a home to return to when the conversation becomes complicated. For example, if someone asks why learning English is important to you, your main message may be, "English will create better career opportunities for me." You can add details about international companies, interviews, online communication, or professional confidence. But if you lose your direction, return to the central idea. The main reason is that I want better career opportunities. This immediately restores structure. Many speakers lose control because they try to communicate too many ideas at once. They begin with career goals, move to travel, mention education, discuss confidence, and then forget the original question. Speaking clearly often requires choosing one direction instead of trying to express everything you know about the topic. The seventh lesson is learning to recover emotionally after the conversation ends. Some learners manage to continue speaking, but later they replay the conversation repeatedly and punish themselves for every mistake. They remember the pause, the forgotten word, the sentence they corrected, and the moment they misunderstood the question. Hours later, the conversation is still happening inside their mind, but now they are producing perfect answers that were unavailable under pressure. This habit makes future conversations more difficult because your brain begins connecting English speaking with emotional punishment. It learns that even after the conversation is finished, you will continue attacking yourself. Naturally, it becomes more afraid the next time you need to speak. After a conversation, you need a healthier recovery process. Begin by asking what you communicated successfully. Maybe you explained your main idea. Maybe you asked a useful question. Maybe you stayed in the conversation despite feeling nervous. Maybe you found another way to express a missing word. Maybe you made a mistake and corrected it without giving up. These moments are evidence of skill, and your brain needs to remember them. Then choose only one thing to improve. Do not create a long list of every error. If you forgot an important word, learn that word and create 3 example sentences with it. If you became confused while giving a long answer, practice expressing the same idea in a simpler form. If you struggled to understand a question, listen to similar conversations and practice useful clarification phrases. Turn the mistake into a small training decision instead of a personal attack. Finally, close the conversation mentally. Tell yourself, that conversation is finished. I learned from it, and I do not need to keep repeating it. Confidence cannot grow when every speaking experience remains open like an emotional wound. Reflection should improve your next conversation, not punish you for the last one. Now it is time to build a practical recovery system that you can use whenever pressure appears. Think of this as a simple sequence your mind can follow when something goes wrong. First, pause instead of panicking. Give yourself one calm breath and accept that the conversation can survive a few seconds of silence. Second, protect the connection by using a phrase such as, "Let me think about that for a moment," or "I want to explain this clearly." Third, simplify the message. Stop searching for the most impressive expression and use the easiest language available. Fourth, recover using description, clarification, correction, or a fresh sentence. Fifth, continue without apologizing for your English or explaining why you became nervous. This sequence is powerful because it replaces emotional reaction with practical action. Instead of thinking, something has gone wrong and I am failing, your mind learns to think, something has gone wrong and I know what to do next. That difference is the foundation of real speaking confidence. To train this skill, create small problems intentionally during practice. Choose a word you know well and pretend you have forgotten it, then explain the meaning using simpler language. Begin a complicated sentence, stop halfway, and practice restarting with, "Let me say that more clearly." Listen to a short question, then ask for clarification even if you understood most of it. Record yourself answering for 2 minutes without deleting mistakes or starting again. Every time you recover, continue speaking for at least one more sentence so your brain learns that the conversation does not end after difficulty. This kind of practice may feel uncomfortable because many learners are accustomed to stopping recordings whenever they make a mistake. They begin again until the answer sounds perfect, then believe the final recording represents their real speaking ability. But real conversations do not have a restart button. Recovery practice is therefore more valuable than perfect practice because it trains the exact skill you will need when the situation cannot be repeated. You should also create a personal collection of recovery phrases. Do not memorize 20 complicated sentences. Choose 5 or 6 expressions that feel natural and practice them until they appear automatically. You might use, "Let me think for a second. What I am trying to say is, but I cannot remember the exact word, but let me explain that differently. Could you repeat the last part? And I lost my thought for a moment, but the main point is." These phrases become emergency doors that keep you inside the conversation when pressure tries to push you out. The goal is not to use recovery phrases in every answer. The goal is to know that they are available. A person feels safer inside a building when they know where the exits are, even if no emergency occurs. In the same way, your mind feels calmer during English conversation when it knows there is always another route forward. As your recovery ability improves, something unexpected will happen. You will begin making fewer mistakes, not because you are trying harder to control your English, but because you are less afraid of what will happen if a mistake occurs. Fear consumes attention. When fear decreases, more attention becomes available for listening, thinking, and speaking. Recovery therefore does more than rescue broken conversations, it prevents many conversations from breaking in the first place. You will also begin noticing that other people respond positively when you handle difficulty calmly. If you forget a word but explain it naturally, the listener may help you. If you misunderstand a question but ask for clarification, the conversation becomes clearer. If you correct yourself without embarrassment, the mistake disappears almost immediately. Your calm reaction teaches the listener how to react. When you treat the moment as normal, they usually treat it as normal too. The opposite is also true. If you panic, apologize repeatedly, and announce that your English is terrible, you make the mistake feel much larger than it was. The listener may not have noticed the original error, but now their attention has been drawn to your fear. You do not need to present every mistake as a public emergency. Correct what matters, simplify what becomes difficult, and allow small imperfections to pass. Remember that fluent communication is not a straight road where nothing ever blocks your path. It is the ability to continue traveling when the road changes. Sometimes you move around a missing word, sometimes you slow down, sometimes you return to an earlier point. Sometimes you ask another person for directions. What matters is that you do not abandon the journey because one part became difficult. From today onward, stop measuring your speaking ability only by how smoothly the conversation begins. Pay attention to what you do after the first difficulty appears. Did you remain calm? Did you use another word? Did you explain the idea differently? Did you ask for repetition? Did you restart a confusing sentence? Did you continue speaking instead of escaping? Every successful recovery is evidence that pressure is losing its power over you. There will still be moments when your English disappears. There will still be questions that surprise you, words that refuse to appear, and sentences that become more complicated than you expected. The purpose of this chapter is not to promise that those moments will vanish forever. It is to make sure they no longer control the ending of your conversation. A forgotten word is only a forgotten word. A pause is only a pause. A grammar mistake is only a small part of one sentence. None of these moments has the power to erase your vocabulary, cancel your progress, or decide your future as an English speaker unless you give it that power. Real confidence is not saying, "I will never make another mistake." Real confidence is saying, "When I make a mistake, I will know how to continue." Real fluency is not speaking without interruption. Real fluency is finding your way back after interruption. Real progress is not the day every sentence becomes perfect. Real progress is the day one imperfect sentence can no longer silence you. Your English does not need to survive every conversation without damage. It only needs to know how to recover. And when recovery becomes a habit, pressure can interrupt your sentence, but it can no longer take away your voice. Chapter 6. Train your English under controlled pressure. Confidence must be practiced where fear appears. There is a reason you may sound fluent while speaking alone but become hesitant when a real person enters the conversation, and that reason has very little to do with intelligence, talent, or the amount of English you have studied. It happens because your brain has learned English in one environment but is expected to perform it in a completely different environment. You may have spent hundreds of hours listening to lessons in a quiet room, repeating sentences without interruption, reading subtitles, completing exercises, and practicing answers when nobody was waiting for you. But real communication introduces conditions that your private practice may never have prepared you to handle. In a real conversation, there is another person's attention, a limited amount of response time, unfamiliar pronunciation, unexpected questions, emotional uncertainty, the possibility of misunderstanding, and the pressure of knowing that you cannot pause the situation, search for an answer, or begin again whenever you make a mistake. This difference between comfortable practice and real performance explains why some learners feel confused by their own English ability. They know they have studied seriously. They can recognize thousands of words. They understand complex grammar. They may even speak confidently while recording themselves. Yet during an interview, meeting, phone call, presentation, or conversation with someone unfamiliar, they suddenly feel like a beginner. They begin questioning whether their previous progress was real. But the truth is that their progress was real. It was simply trained under conditions that did not fully resemble the moment in which they needed to use it. Imagine someone who wants to become a strong swimmer but practices every movement while standing safely beside the pool. They study how the arms should move, learn the correct breathing technique, watch professional swimmers, and repeat the motions until they understand them perfectly. This knowledge is useful, but the first time they enter deep water, everything changes. The body feels different, breathing becomes more difficult, fear affects coordination. The person may know exactly what swimming should look like, yet knowledge alone cannot replace experience in the water. To become a real swimmer, they must gradually train under the conditions where swimming actually happens. Speaking English works in the same way. You cannot build pressure-resistant confidence only in places where pressure never appears. You must gradually train your mind to use English while uncertainty, attention, time limits, and nervousness are present. This does not mean throwing yourself into the most frightening speaking situation tomorrow and hoping confidence will magically appear. Sudden exposure to overwhelming pressure can sometimes make fear stronger, especially when the experience ends badly and your brain interprets it as proof that speaking English is dangerous. The solution is controlled pressure, which means practicing in situations that are challenging enough to create growth, but manageable enough for you to remain present, recover, and finish successfully. Controlled pressure is one of the most important ideas in this entire audiobook because it allows you to stop waiting for confidence and start building it. Many learners believe they must first become confident and then begin speaking, but confidence almost never develops in that order. Confidence comes after your brain collects enough evidence that you can enter a difficult situation, experience discomfort, continue communicating, and leave the situation safely. Every successful speaking experience becomes a small piece of proof. One conversation does not transform you, but repeated proof gradually changes your expectations. The brain that once predicted embarrassment begins predicting possibility. The body that once responded with tension begins recognizing the situation as familiar. The voice that once disappeared under pressure begins returning more quickly because it has practiced returning before. This is why motivation alone is not enough. You may listen to an inspiring speech and feel powerful for several hours. You may promise yourself that from tomorrow you will speak English without fear. You may repeat positive statements, imagine yourself speaking confidently, and believe that your mindset has finally changed. These things can help, but the next real conversation may still activate the old response because your nervous system does not change only through ideas. It changes through repeated experience. Your mind needs practical evidence that pressure can be handled, mistakes can be survived, silence can be tolerated, and communication can continue even when your English is not perfect. The first step in pressure training is understanding that nervousness is not a sign that the practice is failing. Nervousness is often the exact condition you need to practice managing. If you wait for every uncomfortable feeling to disappear before speaking, you may remain silent for years because the body cannot learn that a situation is safe while constantly avoiding that situation. Avoidance gives temporary relief, but it also teaches the brain that fear was correct. Every time you refuse a speaking opportunity because you feel nervous, the pressure disappears and your brain concludes that silence protected you. The next opportunity then feels even more dangerous because the brain remembers that escape was the solution last time. However, this does not mean you should attack your fear violently. Growth does not require humiliation, emotional exhaustion, or situations so difficult that you lose control completely. The goal is not to prove that you can suffer. The goal is to teach your mind that you can function while discomfort is present. You need challenges that stretch your ability without breaking your willingness to continue. A successful pressure exercise should leave you thinking, "That was uncomfortable, but I managed it," rather than, "That was terrible, and I never want to try again." To create this kind of training, you need a speaking ladder. A speaking ladder is a gradual series of situations that move from low pressure to higher pressure. You do not jump from speaking alone directly into a major professional presentation. You climb one level at a time, allowing your brain to adapt at every stage. The exact ladder will be different for every learner because the same situation can feel easy to one person and frightening to another. For some learners, sending a voice message creates pressure. For others, speaking to a friend feels comfortable, but talking to a stranger feels difficult. The important thing is to identify your current level honestly and choose the next step that feels challenging but possible. The first level of your speaking ladder may be answering questions aloud when you are completely alone. This sounds simple, but it must be done correctly. Many learners practice alone in a way that removes all pressure. They stop every time they make a mistake, repeat the sentence until it sounds perfect, look up vocabulary immediately, and prepare the entire answer before speaking. This creates polished practice but does not build spontaneous ability. To introduce controlled pressure, choose a question. Give yourself only 5 seconds to think, and then begin speaking without stopping for 1 or 2 minutes. Do not restart the recording. Do not correct every small error. Do not search for words. Your only goal is to keep expressing the idea until the time ends. At first, this exercise may feel surprisingly difficult because it removes the safety of unlimited preparation. You may repeat yourself, forget words, or produce simple sentences, but these difficulties are useful. They reveal what happens when your mind must build language in real time. More importantly, they give you a safe opportunity to practice continuing instead of stopping. Every time you lose a word and explain it differently, every time you restart a sentence without deleting the recording, and every time you remain present until the time ends, you strengthen the exact recovery skills real conversations require. The second level may involve recording a video instead of only recording your voice. Seeing your face on the screen introduces a new kind of pressure because you become more aware of your expressions, eye movement, posture, and hesitation. Many learners dislike watching themselves because they immediately notice everything they believe is wrong. This discomfort can become valuable training if you learn to observe without attacking yourself. Record a 2-minute answer, watch it once, and evaluate only 3 things: whether your message was understandable, whether you continued after difficulties, and whether your pace allowed the listener to follow you. Do not begin by judging your accent, appearance, confidence, grammar, body language, and every tiny hesitation at the same time. That creates the same mental overload that blocks you during real conversations. Choose one useful improvement and ignore the rest until later. Perhaps you spoke too quickly and need to slow down. Perhaps your answer had no clear main idea. Perhaps you used the same word repeatedly. Select one training goal for the next recording. This approach turns observation into progress instead of punishment. The third level may involve sending voice messages to someone you trust. Voice messages are powerful because they sit between private practice and live conversation. Another person will hear you, so there is real attention and real vulnerability, but you still have enough space to think before recording. The challenge is to avoid turning every voice message into a perfect performance. Do not record the same message 10 times until every sentence sounds polished. Give yourself 1 or 2 attempts at most. Speak naturally, allow small imperfections, and send the message. You can begin with simple daily topics. Describe what you did that morning. Explain a decision you made. Share your opinion about a film, or ask a question. The purpose is not to impress the listener. The purpose is to become comfortable, allowing another person to hear your spontaneous English. Over time, increase the length and complexity of the messages. Begin with 30 seconds, then 1 minute, then 2 or 3 minutes. Ask the other person to respond with an unexpected question, so you cannot prepare everything in advance. The fourth level may be a short live conversation with someone familiar. This could be a friend, classmate, family member, tutor, or language partner. Keep the first conversation short enough that you do not feel trapped. 10 minutes of focused speaking can be more valuable than one exhausting hour because it allows you to finish with a sense of completion. Choose one topic beforehand, but do not memorize a script. Prepare only 3 main ideas you would like to discuss. This gives you direction without removing spontaneity. During the conversation, give yourself a specific mission that has nothing to do with perfection. Your mission might be to ask 3 follow-up questions, use 2 recovery phrases, pause calmly instead of rushing, or explain 1 missing word without switching languages. A clear mission helps your mind focus on a trainable skill rather than judging your entire English level. At the end, evaluate whether you completed the mission. Even if your grammar was imperfect, you can still leave the conversation with evidence of success. The 5th level may involve conversations with people who are less familiar. This introduces uncertainty because you do not know exactly how the person will speak, what questions they will ask, or how they will react. Begin with predictable situations where the topic is limited. Ask for information in a shop, speak to customer service, join a small online discussion, or introduce yourself to a new language partner. These situations may create pressure, but they are easier to manage than completely open-ended conversations because the purpose is clear. Before entering the situation, prepare communication tools rather than complete answers. For example, if you need to make a phone call, prepare a simple opening sentence, 2 or 3 important questions, and a phrase for asking the person to repeat something. Do not write an entire script and depend on it because the conversation may move in an unexpected direction. Your goal is to build a flexible structure that can survive change. The 6th level may involve group speaking. Group conversations create a different challenge because you must listen to several people, recognize the right moment to enter, and accept that the topic may change before you are ready. Many learners remain silent in groups not because they have nothing to say, but because they are waiting for a perfect opening. By the time they create the perfect sentence, someone else has spoken and the opportunity is gone. To train for group conversations, begin with a small group of 3 or 4 people. Give yourself the goal of contributing early. Do not wait until you have a brilliant idea. Make 1 simple comment or ask 1 clear question within the first few minutes. Speaking early reduces the pressure that grows when you remain silent for too long. Once your voice has entered the conversation, participating again becomes easier because the psychological barrier has already been crossed. You can also practice interruption phrases that allow you to enter naturally without feeling rude. Expressions such as, "I'd like to add something to that. That reminds me of a similar experience. I agree with part of that, but I see one thing differently." Or, "Can I ask something about that point?" help you join the flow. Practice these phrases aloud until they become familiar, because pressure is less likely to erase language that has been repeated many times in a specific situation. The 7th level may involve important conversations where the emotional stakes are higher. These include interviews, presentations, meetings, professional calls, examinations, or discussions in which your answer may affect an opportunity. These situations should not be your first pressure training environment. They should come after your brain has already developed experience with smaller challenges. When you have practiced speaking under lower levels of pressure, you bring a stronger recovery system into the important moment. For high-pressure situations, realistic rehearsal becomes essential. Do not practice only the perfect answer to questions you expect. Ask someone to interrupt you, challenge your opinion, request clarification, or introduce questions you did not prepare. Practice responding when you do not know the answer. Practice asking for time. Practice correcting a misunderstanding. The purpose is not to predict every possible moment. It is to train your ability to adapt when prediction fails. One of the greatest mistakes learners make before an interview or presentation is memorizing entire paragraphs. Memorization creates a feeling of safety because the words seem prepared, but it can also make pressure more dangerous. If you forget one sentence, the entire structure may collapse because you are trying to remember a sequence rather than communicate an idea. Instead of memorizing exact language, organize your response around key points. Know the message, the example, and the result. Allow the exact wording to change each time you practice. For example, if an interviewer asks about a challenge you faced, do not memorize a perfect paragraph. Remember the structure, describe the situation, explain the difficulty, share the action you took, and mention the result. Practice telling the same story in several different ways. One version may take 30 seconds, another 90 seconds, and another 2 minutes. This flexibility protects you when the interviewer interrupts, asks for more detail, or changes the direction of the conversation. Timed speaking is another important form of pressure training. In comfortable practice, learners often take unlimited time to create answers, but real conversations require faster access. This does not mean you must speak rapidly. It means you need to become comfortable beginning before the entire answer is ready. Set a timer and give yourself 5 seconds to start responding to a question. Your first sentence can be simple. You may say, "The first thing that comes to mind is, Doro dathersum wendrum, oboyer powder and ingyedis, numumdam mogaporyathersum, aspo and tautid mean pence." The biggest issue is. Once you begin, the rest of the answer can develop naturally. This technique trains an important distinction between thinking and overthinking. Thinking helps you organize the message. Overthinking tries to control every word before speaking. The first creates clarity. The second creates paralysis. A 5-second limit prevents your mind from building an imaginary perfect answer that becomes impossible to deliver. You should also practice speaking with imperfect preparation. Choose a random topic and give yourself 30 seconds to create 3 simple points. Then speak for 2 minutes without notes. Topics can include the advantages of working from home, a habit that changed your life, the importance of learning languages, a difficult decision, or the qualities of a good friend. The topic itself is not important. The purpose is teaching your brain how to create structure quickly. A useful structure is the main point method. Begin with one clear answer, give a reason, add an example, and finish by returning to the main point. If someone asks whether social media is helpful, you might say, "I think social media can be helpful when it is used intentionally." The main reason is that it allows people to learn, communicate, and discover opportunities. For example, many learners use social media to find free educational content and connect with teachers. However, it becomes harmful when people use it without limits, so the value depends on how it is used. This structure gives your mind a path to follow when pressure makes ideas feel disorganized. Another useful training method is interruption practice. Ask a partner to interrupt you with questions while you are speaking. At first, interruption may make you lose your direction, but this is exactly why it should be practiced. Real conversations are interactive. People ask for examples, challenge details, and respond before you complete everything you planned. When interrupted, answer the question briefly, then use a return phrase such as, "coming back to my original point, as I was saying," or "the main idea I wanted to explain was." This teaches your brain that interruption does not mean the loss of control. You can also practice distraction resistance. Real conversations rarely happen in perfect silence. There may be traffic, people talking, a weak phone connection, or movement around you. If your English only works in complete quiet, environmental noise may increase pressure. Begin practicing with a small amount of background sound. Listen to a cafe recording, sit in a public place, or have someone move around while you speak. The goal is not to make practice unpleasant. It is to gradually reduce your dependence on ideal conditions. Phone conversations deserve special attention because they remove facial expressions and body language, which often help learners understand meaning. Without visual information, listening becomes more demanding, and silence can feel more uncomfortable. To train for phone calls, practice conversations while facing away from your partner or keeping the camera turned off. Focus on asking for confirmation, repeating important details, and using verbal signals that show you are listening. Expressions such as, "I understand," "that makes sense," "let me confirm that," and "could you repeat the number once more," become especially valuable when visual support is unavailable. Another powerful method is uncertainty training. Many learners prepare only for questions they know how to answer, but real confidence requires knowing what to do when you do not know. Ask a partner to give you unfamiliar questions. Your task is not to produce an expert answer. Your task is to respond honestly and continue the conversation. You can say, "I have not thought deeply about that before, but my first reaction is, I do not know enough to give a complete answer, although I think," or "that is outside my experience, but I can relate it to something similar." These phrases allow you to remain engaged without pretending to possess knowledge you do not have. This is an important life skill because confident speakers do not believe they must have an immediate answer to everything. They are comfortable acknowledging uncertainty. Learners often create unnecessary pressure by believing that hesitation means weakness. In reality, an honest and thoughtful response can sound far more intelligent than a rushed answer built from fear. You should also practice disagreement because many learners become more nervous when they must express an opinion that differs from the other person's. They may know how to agree politely, but lose their language when they need to challenge an idea. Begin with low-risk topics and practice respectful disagreement. You can say, "I understand that perspective, but I see it differently. I agree with the general point, although I am not sure about that particular conclusion." Or, "That may be true in some situations, but my experience has been different." These structures help you protect both your message and the relationship. Emotional topics create another form of pressure. When the subject matters deeply to you, your thoughts may move faster than your English. You want to express everything accurately, but emotion makes organization difficult. Practice speaking about meaningful experiences slowly. Begin by identifying the main emotion and the main message. You do not need to explain every detail at once. Use simple sentences, pause when necessary, and allow the listener to ask questions. Emotional honesty does not require complicated vocabulary. One of the most valuable habits in pressure training is learning to separate discomfort from danger. Your body may react strongly during a conversation. Your heartbeat may increase, your hands may feel tense, and your breathing may change. These sensations are uncomfortable, but they do not mean the conversation is unsafe. When the body reacts, do not immediately conclude that you are losing control. Tell yourself, "My body is preparing for a challenge. I can still listen, think, and speak." This interpretation reduces the fear of fear itself. Many learners become anxious not only because they feel nervous, but because they are afraid that nervousness will become visible. They worry that their voice will shake, their face will change, or the other person will notice their discomfort. This creates another layer of pressure. The truth is that visible nervousness is not a disaster. People speak while nervous every day. A slightly shaky voice does not erase the value of your message. A pause does not reveal incompetence. Confidence grows when you stop trying to hide every human reaction and begin focusing on what you want to communicate. Physical preparation can support pressure training. Before a difficult conversation, relax your shoulders, release your jaw, and breathe out more slowly than you breathe in. A long exhale signals safety to the body. Plant both feet on the ground and notice one physical object in the room. This brings your attention out of imagined judgment and back into the present moment. Then decide on one communication goal. Perhaps you want to ask a clear question, share one important idea, or remain in the conversation for 5 minutes. A small, specific goal is easier for the mind to manage than the vague demand to speak perfectly. Your first sentence also deserves special training because pressure is often strongest before you begin. Once the voice starts moving, the mind frequently becomes more organized. Prepare a few opening patterns that can work in many situations. You may begin with, "The main thing I would say is, from my experience, there are several reasons, but the most important one is," or "I have a slightly different view on that." These patterns should not become rigid scripts. They are starting points that reduce the amount of language your brain must create under immediate pressure. At the same time, do not depend on one opening phrase so heavily that you panic when it does not fit. Practice several options and use them flexibly. Your goal is not to sound identical in every conversation. Your goal is to reduce the difficulty of entering the conversation. Listening must also become part of pressure training because many speaking problems begin before you answer. When you are nervous, you may listen only for keywords while preparing your response. This divided attention causes misunderstanding and makes your answer harder to organize. Practice listening without planning your answer until the speaker finishes. Afterward, take one breath, identify the main point, and respond. You may feel slower at first, but your answers will become more relevant and your mind will carry less unnecessary information. A powerful exercise is the summary and response method. Ask a partner to speak for 1 minute about any topic. Before sharing your opinion, summarize their main idea in 1 or 2 sentences. You might say, "So, you are saying that working from home provides flexibility, but it can also create isolation." Then respond. This exercise trains listening, confirms understanding, and gives you time to organize your thoughts. It also makes conversations feel more connected because the other person can see that you truly heard them. Question asking is another pressure-reducing skill that learners often ignore. They believe a good speaker must always produce long answers, but real conversation is balanced. You do not have to carry the entire discussion alone. Ask open questions such as, "What made you think that? How did that experience affect you?" Or, "What do you think should happen next?" When the other person speaks, you receive time to listen, breathe, and prepare naturally. More importantly, you become an active conversational partner, rather than someone performing a speech. However, questions should not become an escape from speaking. Some anxious learners ask question after question to avoid sharing their own ideas. Use questions to create connection, then add your experience or opinion. A healthy pattern is to ask, listen, respond, and relate. This balance builds real conversational confidence. Pressure training should include repetition, but the repetition must remain flexible. Discuss the same topic several times with different people or in different formats. Speak about your career goals in a voice recording, then in a live conversation, then in a group. Each repetition will strengthen vocabulary and structure, but because the questions and reactions change, your English will not become dependent on memorization. You should also repeat difficult situations after they happen. Suppose you struggled during a phone call and could not explain your problem clearly. Do not simply feel embarrassed and avoid similar calls. Recreate the situation. Write down the main message. Identify where pressure appeared and practice the conversation again. Use different wording and imagine possible questions. This turns a painful experience into training data. The goal is not to erase the memory of failure, but to complete the learning that failure began. Without review, your brain may remember only fear. With constructive repetition, it begins remembering solutions. Tracking your pressure training can also accelerate progress. Keep a simple speaking record. After each practice session or real conversation, note the situation, your pressure level from 1 to 10, what you communicated successfully, how you recovered, and one small goal for next time. Over several weeks, you may notice that situations once rated 9 now feel like 6. You may still feel nervous, but you recover faster and speak longer. This evidence protects you from the false belief that you are not improving. Do not measure progress only by the absence of anxiety. Pressure may remain for some time, especially in important situations. Measure how quickly you begin, how well you stay present, how often you recover, and whether you complete the conversation. You may feel nervous and still perform much better than before. That is real progress. Many learners destroy their own confidence by expecting improvement to be perfectly smooth. They have one good conversation and believe the problem is solved, then one difficult conversation makes them think they have returned to the beginning. Language confidence does not grow in a straight line. Your performance will be affected by sleep, stress, the topic, the listener's accent, your familiarity with the situation, and many other factors. One bad conversation does not cancel 10 successful ones. It is simply one more training experience. You should expect variation. Some days your English will feel available and natural. Other days you may struggle with simple words. This happens even in your native language when you are tired or distracted. Do not create a permanent identity from a temporary performance. Evaluate the pattern across weeks and months rather than judging yourself based on one moment. Rest is also part of training. Pressure exposure without recovery can create exhaustion. If you force yourself into difficult speaking situations every day while constantly criticizing your performance, your mind may begin resisting English even more. Combine challenge with reflection and rest. After a demanding conversation, allow yourself to relax. Recognize the courage required to enter the situation. Improvement grows through consistent practice, not emotional punishment. Your environment matters as well. Choose practice partners who allow you to finish your thoughts, respond respectfully, and understand that the goal is communication. A supportive listener does not need to ignore every mistake, but correction should be useful and timed appropriately. Constant interruption can make self-monitoring worse. During fluency practice, ask the listener to save corrections until the end. During accuracy practice, focus on only 1 or 2 patterns. Do not attempt to repair your entire English in one conversation. This distinction between fluency practice and accuracy practice is essential. Fluency practice trains continuation, speed of access, idea development, and recovery. Accuracy practice trains grammar, pronunciation, and precise language. Both are important, but they should not always happen at the same time. If you correct every mistake while trying to speak spontaneously, pressure increases and flow disappears. If you never examine mistakes, improvement may become slower. Give each type of practice its own purpose. For example, during a 10-minute fluency session, speak without interruption and focus on communicating the message. Record the session. Later, listen and choose 2 recurring errors. Practice those errors separately with clear examples. Then return to another fluency session without trying to monitor every rule. Over time, correct patterns will become more automatic because they were trained outside the pressure of spontaneous speech. Pronunciation should be handled in the same way. Trying to control every sound during a real conversation can make your speech unnatural and slow. Choose one pronunciation feature during focused practice, such as word stress, final consonants, or a specific vowel sound. Repeat it until it becomes easier. During the conversation, return your attention to meaning. The goal is to build automatic habits that require less conscious control. You must also learn to distinguish productive pressure from destructive pressure. Productive pressure makes you slightly nervous but still able to think, speak, and recover. Destructive pressure overwhelms you so completely that you cannot engage with the task and leave feeling defeated. If an exercise is repeatedly destructive, reduce the difficulty, shorten the conversation, choose a more familiar partner, prepare key ideas, or practice the situation in smaller parts. Reducing difficulty is not weakness, it is intelligent training. Athletes do not begin with the heaviest possible weight. Musicians do not start by performing the most difficult piece at full speed. They build capacity gradually. English speaking deserves the same patience. The correct level is one where failure is possible, but recovery is also possible. One of the most powerful training goals is to practice staying 5 seconds longer than your fear wants you to stay. When you feel the urge to end the answer, add one more sentence. When you want to switch to your native language, try explaining the idea once more in simpler English. When you want to leave the group conversation, ask one final question. These small acts teach your brain that discomfort does not control your behavior. Over time, 5 extra seconds become 30 seconds, then several minutes. Speaking stamina grows through small extensions, not heroic efforts. You should also create deliberate success. Choose topics you know well and practice discussing them under moderate pressure. Success builds confidence faster when the brain recognizes that you possess something valuable to communicate. Speak about your work, hobbies, city, goals, or an experience you understand deeply. Once you become comfortable organizing ideas under pressure, gradually move toward unfamiliar topics. Remember that confidence is specific before it becomes general. You may become confident discussing your profession, but remain nervous during social conversations. You may speak comfortably with a tutor but freeze in a group. This does not mean your progress is false. It means each environment requires evidence. Continue expanding the range of situations in which your brain has experienced successful communication. Real-world missions can make this process practical. Choose one small mission each week. Ask a stranger a simple question in English. Join a 10-minute online conversation. Send 3 voice messages, contribute once during a meeting, or speak for 2 minutes without preparation. The mission should be clear enough that success can be measured. Become fluent this week is impossible. Ask one follow-up question during my next English conversation is specific and achievable. After completing the mission, record what happened. Do not focus only on whether the conversation felt smooth. Notice whether your prediction was accurate. Perhaps you expected the person to judge your accent, but they answered normally. Perhaps you expected your mind to remain blank, but the words returned after the first sentence. Perhaps you made a mistake and nobody reacted. These moments weaken the fear story your mind has repeated for years. You must also learn from difficult missions without turning them into evidence against yourself. Suppose you joined a group and understood very little. Instead of concluding, "I cannot speak English," identify the specific challenge. Was the accent unfamiliar? Was the topic specialized? Did several people speak at once? Were you already tired? Specific analysis creates a training plan. General self-judgment creates hopelessness. If the problem was speed, practice listening to faster conversations and identifying key points. If the topic was unfamiliar, learn a small set of useful vocabulary. If entering the group was difficult, prepare 2 interruption phrases. Every difficulty becomes manageable when it is defined accurately. Another powerful tool is mental rehearsal, but it must include difficulty rather than only perfection. Many learners imagine themselves speaking flawlessly, which feels good but may not prepare them for real pressure. Instead, imagine entering the situation feeling nervous, forgetting a word, using a recovery phrase, and continuing successfully. Visualize a realistic challenge followed by a realistic response. This teaches your mind that success does not require perfect conditions. Before an interview, imagine being asked a question you did not expect. See yourself pausing calmly and saying, "That is an interesting question. Let me think for a moment." Imagine organizing one clear point and giving an honest answer. Before a presentation, imagine losing your place, looking at your notes, and returning to the main idea without panic. This type of rehearsal builds recovery confidence. Your inner language during pressure training matters greatly. Do not tell yourself, "I must not be nervous," because the moment nervousness appears, you will believe you have failed. Tell yourself, "I can speak while nervous." Do not say, "I cannot make mistakes." Say, "I can recover from mistakes." Do not demand, "I must sound fluent." Choose, "I will communicate one clear idea at a time." These statements are believable, practical, and connected to actions you can control. You cannot completely control how nervous you feel, how quickly another person speaks, or which question appears. You can control whether you breathe, listen, simplify, ask for clarification, and continue. Confidence grows when your attention moves from uncontrollable outcomes to controllable behaviors. Another important lesson is that pressure decreases through familiarity. The first time you do something, your brain must process the situation, the language, and the emotional uncertainty at the same time. The 5th or 10th time, the environment feels less mysterious. This is why repeated exposure to the same type of conversation is powerful. Make several phone calls instead of one. Attend the same discussion group every week. Practice interviews repeatedly. Familiarity reduces the amount of mental energy required to understand what is happening, leaving more energy for language. Do not confuse familiarity with lack of progress. Some learners constantly search for new resources, new partners, and new methods because repetition feels boring. But confidence is often built inside repetition. The first conversation proves you can enter. The second helps you notice patterns. The 5th improves your timing. The 10th allows your personality to appear because survival is no longer your only concern. Eventually, pressure training creates a major transformation. At first, your attention is almost entirely focused on yourself. You wonder how you sound, whether you are correct, and what the other person thinks. As the situation becomes familiar, attention begins moving outward. You become curious about the topic. You notice the other person's emotions. You respond with humor. You disagree naturally. You forget for a moment that you are speaking English. That moment is one of the clearest signs of developing fluency. Fluency is not only faster language, it is freedom from constant self-observation. It is the ability to become involved in the meaning deeply enough that English begins serving the conversation instead of becoming the center of it. You may not notice this transformation immediately because it develops gradually. One day, after a conversation, you will realize that you did not translate every sentence. Another day, you will notice that you made a mistake and continued without thinking about it. Later, you will recognize that you asked an unexpected question naturally. These moments are not accidents. They are the results of repeated pressure training. To build this transformation systematically, create a weekly routine that includes several types of practice. Spend one day on spontaneous solo speaking, another on voice messages, another on a live conversation, and another on review. Include one controlled challenge each week that raises the pressure slightly. Keep the routine realistic enough that you can continue for months. Consistency is more powerful than one intense week followed by complete silence. During review, listen to a short part of your speaking rather than analyzing every minute. Find evidence of progress. Notice a sentence that came naturally, a recovery that worked, or an idea you explained clearly. Then select one improvement. This balanced review protects confidence while supporting growth. You should also repeat strong moments, not only weak ones. When you produce a clear answer, write down the structure and practice using it with another topic. When a recovery phrase feels natural, repeat it until it becomes automatic. When a conversation goes well, identify why. Perhaps you focused on the message, knew the topic, or felt connected to the listener. Success contains information that can be trained again. Many people study their failures deeply and treat success as luck. Reverse that habit. Study what works. Confidence grows faster when you understand how you create it. There may be times when you do everything correctly and still experience a difficult conversation. The listener may be impatient, the accent may be unfamiliar, or the environment may be stressful. Do not use these moments to judge your entire ability. Communication is a shared responsibility. Sometimes difficulty comes from the situation, not only from your English. A confident learner understands this and does not carry every unsuccessful conversation as a personal failure. You are allowed to ask someone to slow down. You are allowed to say that you did not understand. You are allowed to request clarification. You are allowed to take time before answering. These actions do not reduce your value. They increase the chance of real understanding. As your pressure tolerance grows, begin entering conversations with a different question. Instead of asking, "Will I perform well?" ask, "What can I discover here?" Instead of thinking, how do I protect myself from mistakes? Think, how can I make this exchange useful? This shift from protection to curiosity changes the emotional atmosphere. Curiosity opens the mind. Fear narrows it. When you become curious, you listen more carefully, ask better questions, and respond to the real person rather than to the imaginary judge inside your head. Your English becomes more alive because it is connected to genuine interest. Never forget that the purpose of pressure training is not to turn you into a person who never feels nervous. Important situations may always create some energy. The goal is to stop treating that energy as a command to disappear. You can feel your heartbeat and still speak. You can forget a word and still communicate. You can make a mistake and still remain respected. You can be uncertain and still contribute something valuable. This is the kind of confidence that survives real life because it does not depend on comfort. It has been trained inside discomfort. It knows how to breathe when the answer is not ready, how to simplify when language becomes complicated, and how to continue when the first sentence does not work. Your practice must therefore stop being a place where you only prove what you already know. It must become a laboratory where you safely meet the situations that usually silence you. Create time pressure, unfamiliar questions, interruptions, group discussions, phone calls, and real listeners in controlled amounts. Do not search for perfect practice. Search for useful struggle followed by successful recovery. Every time you practice under controlled pressure, you are building a bridge between the English you know privately and the English you can use publicly. That bridge may feel weak at first. Your sentences may shake. Your vocabulary may arrive slowly. But every completed conversation strengthens the structure. Every recovery adds support. Every moment you remain instead of escaping makes the bridge safer for the next time. One day, you will enter a situation that once terrified you and notice that your mind is still open. Pressure may appear, but it will not feel unfamiliar. You will recognize it as a sensation you have trained with many times before. You will breathe, listen, begin with one clear sentence, and allow the conversation to develop. Your English will not be perfect, but it will be available, flexible, and alive. That day will not arrive because fear finally decided to leave you alone. It will arrive because you repeatedly showed your mind that fear could be present without controlling your behavior. You did not wait for confidence. You trained it. You did not demand that pressure disappear. You learned how to speak while it was still in the room. This is how calm English is built, not through endless preparation in silence, but through gradual experience in reality. Not by avoiding every difficult moment, but by choosing challenges small enough to complete and meaningful enough to change you. Not by proving that you never struggle, but by proving that struggle no longer decides when your voice must stop. Your next conversation does not need to be perfect. It only needs to become one more piece of evidence. Evidence that you can begin before you feel completely ready, that you can remain while pressure rises, that you can recover when language breaks, and that you can finish with your voice still present. Collect that evidence patiently. Collect it through recordings, voice messages, calls, meetings, questions, mistakes, pauses, corrections, and completed conversations. Eventually, the evidence will become stronger than the fear. When that happens, pressure may still knock on the door, but your mind will no longer hand it the key. You will know that you have trained for this moment. You will know that discomfort is not danger. You will know that one forgotten word cannot erase an entire language. You will know that you do not need to impress, perform, or become perfect before you deserve to speak. You will simply enter the conversation, trust the skills you have practiced, and give your English the opportunity to live where it was always meant to live, not only inside your mind, but in the real world, under real pressure, with real people listening. Chapter 7. Become the calm speaker your English has been waiting for. There comes a point in every serious learner's journey when the next breakthrough no longer depends on discovering another grammar rule, memorizing another list of vocabulary, or watching another lesson about confidence. The next breakthrough depends on identity. It depends on the person you believe yourself to be when English enters a real conversation. You may have already built enough vocabulary to communicate, enough grammar to express complex ideas, and enough listening ability to understand far more than you could a few years ago. But if you continue entering every conversation with the identity of someone who freezes, fails, forgets, and needs to protect themselves, your mind will continue producing the same pressured response. Your English may improve, but the old image of yourself will keep pulling your speaking ability backward. This is why two learners with similar English levels can sound completely different in the same situation. One learner enters the conversation thinking, "I hope they do not discover that my English is weak," while the other enters thinking, "I may need a moment, but I can communicate my idea." The first learner treats every question as a threat to their identity. The second treats it as a normal opportunity to connect. Their vocabulary may be almost identical, yet their internal expectations create completely different voices. One person speaks while trying to hide, and the other speaks while trying to share. Your speaking identity is built from the meaning you give to your past experiences. Perhaps you once froze during a presentation, struggled during an interview, misunderstood a native speaker, or gave an answer that sounded much weaker than the one inside your mind. That moment may have lasted only a few minutes, but you carried it forward for years. You did not remember it as one difficult experience. You transformed it into a definition of yourself. You began saying, "I cannot speak under pressure, my mind always goes blank," or "I am not confident in English." The event ended, but the identity remained. The mind is extremely powerful when it receives a repeated identity. When you tell yourself that you always freeze, your attention begins searching for the first sign of freezing. The moment you pause, forget a word, or feel your heartbeat increase, the mind says, "Here it is again. This always happens to me." That conclusion creates more fear, and the fear makes the pause longer. Soon the identity appears to prove itself, not because it was permanently true, but because your expectation helped create the result. This does not mean you can solve the problem by repeating unrealistic statements such as, "I am the most fluent English speaker in the world." Your mind knows when a statement feels false, and empty motivation rarely survives real pressure. A powerful identity must be believable, flexible, and connected to behavior. Instead of saying, "I never feel nervous," you can say, "I know how to speak while nervous." Instead of saying, "I never forget words," you can say, "I know how to continue when a word disappears." Instead of claiming, "My English is perfect," you can remind yourself, "My English is strong enough to create understanding." These identities are powerful because they do not depend on perfect conditions. They leave space for pressure, mistakes, pauses, and uncertainty, while still protecting your ability to communicate. A person who believes confidence means never feeling nervous will lose confidence the moment nervousness appears. A person who believes confidence means responding skillfully to nervousness can remain confident even while their body is uncomfortable. One identity is fragile because it depends on control. The other is stable because it depends on recovery. The purpose of everything you have learned in this audiobook is not to help you create perfect conversations. It is to help you become the kind of speaker who remains available to themselves when the conversation becomes imperfect. You are building a mind that does not disappear when another person is listening, a voice that does not surrender because one sentence breaks, and an identity that does not collapse because the pressure is stronger than expected. To create that identity, you must begin noticing the difference between your emotional state and your speaking ability. Many learners combine these two things so closely that they believe feeling nervous means speaking badly. The moment anxiety appears, they assume failure has already started. But nervousness is only one signal from the body. It is not a complete measurement of your ability. You can feel pressure and still listen carefully. You can feel uncertain and still produce a clear answer. You can notice tension in your voice and still communicate something valuable. Think about other areas of life where people perform while feeling uncomfortable. A doctor may feel pressure during a difficult situation and still make careful decisions. An athlete may feel nervous before a major competition and still use years of training. A speaker may feel their heartbeat increase before walking onto a stage and still deliver a powerful message. The feeling does not automatically decide the performance. The person learns not to treat the feeling as a command. You must develop the same relationship with English pressure. When nervousness appears, do not say, "I am losing my English." Say, "My body is responding to attention, but my skills are still available." When your heart begins beating faster, do not interpret it as proof that the conversation will fail. Recognize it as energy created by uncertainty. When your first sentence sounds less smooth than you hoped, do not predict that the rest of the answer will be worse. Allow the conversation time to warm you up. Many learners judge an entire conversation by the first 10 seconds. If the beginning feels uncomfortable, they believe the whole experience is already ruined. This belief creates unnecessary panic because the opening is often the moment of highest pressure. Your body has not yet adapted to the situation, your voice has not found its rhythm, and your attention may still be focused on yourself. After 1 or 2 answers, the nervous system often begins settling naturally. You must give yourself enough time to arrive fully inside the conversation. A calm speaker does not demand perfection from the opening. They understand that confidence can develop while the conversation is happening. Their first answer may be simple. Their voice may need a moment to become steady. They may begin slowly and become more expressive after several minutes. This is not failure, it is adjustment. The mind is moving from preparation into participation. One of the strongest identity changes you can make is replacing the belief "I must feel ready before I begin" with "beginning helps me become ready." This is true in almost every speaking situation. Waiting outside the conversation usually makes pressure stronger because imagination fills the empty space with negative possibilities. Once you begin speaking, reality replaces imagination. The listener becomes a real person instead of an imagined judge. The topic becomes specific instead of mysterious, and the next step becomes visible. The first sentence, therefore, does not need to demonstrate your highest level. It only needs to open the door. You can begin with a clear, simple statement and allow your English to become more detailed as your mind settles. Someone may ask for your opinion about remote work, and instead of trying to create a sophisticated answer immediately, you can say, "I think remote work can be very useful, but it depends on the person and the type of job." That sentence creates direction. You can then explain the advantages, mention the disadvantages, and add an example. The full answer grows from a manageable beginning. Pressure becomes dangerous when you believe the first sentence must carry the entire weight of your intelligence. It does not. The first sentence has one job: to begin. Your second sentence can clarify. Your third can add detail, and your fourth can give an example. Real speaking is built progressively. You do not need to deliver the complete idea in one perfect movement. As you build a new speaking identity, you must also change the way you define fluency. Many learners imagine fluency as fast, effortless speech without pauses, corrections, forgotten words, or uncertainty. This image is not only unrealistic, it is harmful because it makes ordinary communication feel like evidence of weakness. Human speech contains hesitation. People search for words when explaining difficult ideas. They change sentences midway when they discover a clearer direction. They pause because thought often develops more slowly than speech. True fluency is not the elimination of every interruption. It is the ability to maintain meaning through interruption. A fluent speaker may pause, but the conversation remains connected. They may forget a word, but the message continues through description. They may make an error, but the listener still understands. They may lose their direction, but they return to the main idea. Fluency is not a perfectly smooth road. It is the ability to keep traveling when the road becomes uneven. You should begin evaluating your English according to this deeper definition. Ask yourself whether you can remain in the conversation, whether you can make your idea understandable, whether you can listen and respond to the real meaning, and whether you can recover when something becomes difficult. These are far more valuable indicators than speed alone. Speaking quickly without clarity is not fluency. Using advanced vocabulary while losing the listener is not fluency. Producing perfect rehearsed sentences but collapsing when the question changes is not fluency. A calm speaker chooses usefulness over performance. They understand that communication succeeds when meaning reaches another person. This principle allows them to use simple English without embarrassment because they know simplicity is not the same as weakness. In many situations, the clearest sentence is also the strongest sentence. Complicated language may impress occasionally, but clear language creates trust. Imagine explaining an important problem at work. One person uses several advanced words but creates a confusing message. Another says, "The project is late because we did not receive the final information from the client. We can still finish this week if we receive it by tomorrow." The second speaker may use simpler language, but their communication is far more valuable because everyone understands the problem, the cause, and the solution. Your identity should therefore move away from "I need to sound advanced" and toward "I need to make the message clear." This protects you from the pressure of performing above your natural level. It also allows advanced language to appear more naturally because you are no longer forcing it into every sentence. When a precise word is available, use it. When it is not, communicate with the words you have. There is an important difference between expanding your English and performing your English. Expanding happens through study, reading, listening, feedback, and deliberate practice. Performing happens when you try to prove your level during every conversation. Expansion creates growth. Performance creates pressure. You can continue learning advanced expressions, but during real communication, your first responsibility is connection. A permanent pressure reset also requires you to change your relationship with mistakes. As long as mistakes feel like threats to your identity, every conversation will contain fear. You must stop treating errors as public evidence that you do not belong in English. A mistake means only that your language system is still developing, that your attention was divided, or that spontaneous communication produced an imperfect form. It does not mean your intelligence is lower. It does not cancel your progress. It does not remove your right to continue speaking. The most dangerous mistakes are often not grammatical. The most dangerous mistake is deciding to remain silent when you have something valuable to say. Another dangerous mistake is abandoning a conversation because one word disappears. Another is apologizing for your English so frequently that you teach yourself to feel ashamed every time you use it. These habits damage communication far more deeply than a wrong preposition or an incorrect verb tense. You should correct errors when correction improves meaning, but you do not need to turn every mistake into a trial. Make the correction and move forward. She goes to work early. The moment is finished. Do not carry it into the next sentence. When the listener clearly understands, you may sometimes choose not to correct the mistake at all. Protect the flow unless accuracy is necessary for understanding. This requires emotional discipline because the mind may want to replay the error immediately. While continuing your answer, part of you may keep thinking, "I used the wrong word. That sounded terrible." This internal replay steals attention from the next sentence and creates another mistake. The original error may have lasted 1 second, but your mind extends it for 30 seconds. You must learn to close the mistake quickly. You can silently tell yourself, "That sentence is finished," then return your attention to the listener. This small habit prevents one imperfect moment from contaminating the rest of the conversation. It also teaches your mind that mistakes have boundaries. They begin, they are handled, and they end. The same principle applies after the conversation. Reflection is useful, but emotional punishment is not. A strong learner reviews the experience to discover specific improvements. A pressured learner replays the experience to confirm a negative identity. The first person asks, "What can I train?" The second asks, "Why am I always like this?" One question creates action. The other creates shame. After a difficult conversation, describe the problem accurately. Do not say, "My English was terrible." That statement is too general to create improvement. Say, "I struggled to organize my answer when the question was unexpected," or "I could not understand the speaker's pronunciation during the phone call," or "I became nervous after forgetting one important word." A specific problem gives you a specific training path. If organization was the issue, practice answering with one main point, one reason, and one example. If listening was difficult, find recordings with a similar accent and practice summarizing the main message. If one missing word caused panic, practice describing words you cannot remember. Accurate diagnosis turns embarrassment into education. You must also record what worked. Perhaps you asked the person to repeat the question instead of pretending to understand. Perhaps you recovered after pausing. Perhaps you completed the conversation despite feeling nervous. Perhaps your answer was simple, but the listener responded positively. These moments are essential because identity is built from evidence. Your brain cannot develop a new image of you if you refuse to notice every successful action. Many learners believe confidence will appear once they become good enough. In reality, confidence develops when they begin interpreting their existing evidence differently. You may already have completed hundreds of English conversations, but if you remember only the uncomfortable parts, your mind will still believe you cannot speak. You need to create a fair memory of your progress. Think about how much you can do today that once felt impossible. There was probably a time when you could not understand an English video without translating every sentence. There may have been a time when introducing yourself felt difficult, when writing a short message required constant dictionary use, or when hearing native speakers sounded like one continuous sound. Those experiences changed gradually, but because you adjusted to the new ability, you stopped recognizing it as progress. This is called the disappearing achievement. Something that once felt extraordinary becomes normal, and then you forget that you ever struggled with it. You focus on the next weakness and conclude that you are not moving forward. A calm speaking identity grows when you regularly remember how far you have already traveled. This does not mean becoming satisfied and refusing further growth. It means building improvement on respect rather than rejection. You can say, "I have made real progress and I am ready for the next level." This creates a healthier motivation than saying, "I am still not good enough." Your identity is also influenced by the language you use to describe yourself in front of others. Some learners immediately announce, "My English is very bad," before every conversation. They believe this will protect them from judgment because the listener will lower their expectations. In reality, this habit tells your own mind that you should feel ashamed and prepares you to notice every error. It also places unnecessary attention on your English when the conversation could have focused on the topic. You do not need to apologize for being a learner. Learning another language requires courage, intelligence, patience, and repeated vulnerability. You may say, "English is not my first language, so I may need a moment," when that information is genuinely useful. But do not reduce yourself before you have even begun. Do not invite the listener to see your English as a problem when it is actually the tool allowing two people from different language backgrounds to communicate. Every time you use English, you are doing something complex. You are listening to sounds, identifying words, interpreting meaning, organizing ideas, selecting vocabulary, building grammar, controlling pronunciation, reading social signals, and responding in real time. The fact that this process sometimes feels difficult is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence that your brain is performing a demanding task. Respecting the difficulty does not mean making excuses. It means giving yourself enough patience to develop. A musician does not hate their hands for needing practice. An athlete does not consider themselves unintelligent because their body becomes tired. A language learner should not interpret temporary hesitation as a personal failure. The pressure-proof speaker also understands that comparison is one of the fastest ways to destroy natural communication. You may compare your English with a friend who speaks more quickly, a colleague who studied abroad, a teacher with decades of experience, or a creator whose videos are carefully edited. This comparison removes the real context. You do not know how many hours they have practiced, how early they began, what opportunities they received, or how many mistakes existed before you heard the final result. Comparison turns another person's ability into evidence against your own progress. A healthier approach is observation without self-rejection. Ask what you can learn from their clarity, rhythm, vocabulary, or confidence. Use the example as direction rather than judgment. You are not competing to become another person. Your goal is to become more capable than your previous self. Can you speak longer than 6 months ago? Can you explain ideas more clearly? Can you recover faster? Can you understand a wider range of speakers? Can you enter situations you once avoided? These questions measure real development. A calm identity is also built through consistency. You cannot speak once every few weeks, experience intense pressure, and expect your brain to consider English a normal activity. The mind becomes comfortable with what it experiences repeatedly. English must become part of your ordinary life, not only an event you enter when something important happens. You do not need to create exhausting daily practice. Small, regular contact is often more powerful. Speak aloud for several minutes while describing your plans. Send voice messages. Summarize something you watched. Ask yourself a question and answer without preparation. Join short conversations. The purpose is to keep the path between thought and speech open. When English speaking becomes rare, every opportunity feels like a performance. When it becomes regular, each conversation feels like one moment in an ongoing process. This reduces the emotional importance of any single mistake. A bad conversation no longer feels like disaster because another opportunity will come soon. You should create a calm speaking routine before important conversations. This routine should be simple enough to use anywhere. Begin by deciding the main message you want to communicate. Do not prepare every possible sentence. Identify only the central point. Then relax the body by lowering the shoulders, releasing the jaw, and taking a slow breath out. Remind yourself that your job is not to perform English, but to create understanding. Finally, choose one opening sentence that helps you enter the topic. This routine prepares the mind without creating dependence on memorization. It reduces uncertainty while preserving flexibility. The goal is not to remove all nervousness. It is to prevent nervousness from becoming disorganization. During the conversation, return to 3 anchors: the person, the message, and the next sentence. Focus on the person instead of imagining their judgment. Focus on the message instead of your English level. Focus on the next sentence instead of trying to prepare the entire conversation. These anchors prevent your attention from becoming overwhelmed. The person in front of you is not an audience representing the entire English-speaking world. They are one human being in one moment. The message does not need to include every thought you have ever had about the topic. It needs one clear direction. The next sentence does not need to be perfect. It needs to move the conversation one step forward. This method is especially valuable when the mind begins going blank. Pressure often makes you think too widely. You try to remember all your vocabulary, predict all possible reactions, and produce the complete answer immediately. Narrowing attention restores control. Ask, what is the simplest, true sentence I can say next? That question gives your mind a manageable task. Suppose someone asks why you changed careers, and your mind becomes confused because the full story is complicated. You do not need to explain everything at once. Begin with, I wanted work that matched my strengths better. Then continue with one example. The conversation can develop through follow-up questions. You are not required to deliver a complete autobiography in your first response. The calm speaker trusts the conversation to help build the answer. They understand that communication is shared. The listener may ask for clarification, show interest in one detail, or guide the discussion naturally. You do not have to predict everything before speaking. This trust reduces the pressure to control the entire interaction. Another part of your new identity is learning to use silence intelligently. Silence is not always evidence that English has disappeared. Sometimes it is the space where your strongest answer is being organized. A rushed speaker often fills every pause with unnecessary words because they fear losing the listener. A calm speaker knows that a brief pause can improve clarity. The difference lies in how you carry the pause. If your body becomes tense, your eyes search desperately, and you apologize repeatedly, the silence feels like panic. If you remain present and say, let me think about that for a moment, the same silence feels intentional. You control its meaning. You can practice this by deliberately pausing before answering during low-pressure conversations. Listen fully, take one breath, and then begin. At first, the pause may feel uncomfortable because you are accustomed to responding immediately. Over time, your mind learns that you are allowed to think. This prevents fast, disorganized answers created only to escape silence. Your new identity must also include the ability to say, I do not know. Pressure increases when you believe a confident speaker must have an answer to every question. You may begin inventing information, speaking without direction, or using vague language because admitting uncertainty feels embarrassing. In reality, confident communication includes honesty. You can say, I do not know enough about that to give a complete answer, but my first thought is, or, I have not experienced that personally, so I would need to learn more. These responses protect your credibility and allow you to remain part of the conversation. Not knowing a subject is different from not knowing English. This distinction is extremely important. Sometimes you become silent because the topic itself is unfamiliar, but you blame your language ability. You might struggle to discuss economics, advanced technology, legal systems, or medical research even in your native language. The problem is not always English. It may be knowledge, experience, or interest. Do not use every difficult topic as evidence against your fluency. When the subject is unfamiliar, focus on what you can do. Ask questions. Connect it to something you understand. Share a general reaction. Say, I have not studied this topic deeply, but I am interested in how it affects ordinary people. This keeps you engaged without pretending expertise. A pressure-resistant identity also requires strong listening habits. Many learners believe confidence is demonstrated by speaking for long periods, but a powerful conversationalist is not someone who constantly talks. They know how to listen, understand, and respond. Listening reduces pressure because you no longer carry the responsibility of performing every second. Become interested in the speaker's meaning. Ask follow-up questions based on what they actually said. Reflect part of their message before adding your opinion. When the conversation becomes about genuine exchange, you stop seeing English as a spotlight pointed at your weaknesses. This is why curiosity is one of the best pressure resets available. Anxiety asks, what do they think about me? Curiosity asks, what can I understand about them? Anxiety turns attention inward. Curiosity turns attention outward. You cannot completely disappear into self-judgment while being deeply interested in the person in front of you. Before a conversation, choose one thing you genuinely want to learn. Ask about the person's experience, opinion, or reasoning. When they respond, listen for details rather than preparing the perfect sentence. This creates a real relationship, even if the conversation is short. Your English becomes stronger when it has a purpose beyond proving itself. When you use English to solve a problem, understand another person, share an experience, teach something, make someone laugh, or participate in a meaningful discussion, The language begins feeling like a tool instead of a test. You should therefore create speaking experiences connected to real interests. Discuss films, business, technology, books, sports, relationships, travel, personal growth, or any topic that makes you forget for a moment that you are practicing. Genuine interest creates stronger language because emotion and meaning help ideas move more naturally. A permanent reset also requires patience with plateaus. There will be periods when your speaking progress feels slow. You may practice regularly but notice the same hesitation, pronunciation difficulty, or grammar error. This does not mean the process has stopped. Many language changes develop invisibly before they become available in spontaneous speech. A word may be familiar in listening long before it appears naturally in conversation. A grammar pattern may be correct during exercises before it becomes automatic under pressure. Your mind needs repetition, recovery, sleep, and time to organize language. Do not abandon effective practice because improvement is not immediately visible. You must learn to respect delayed progress. The conversation that feels difficult today may be preparing the automatic response that appears months later. Every attempt is creating connections even when the result feels imperfect. The danger of impatience is that it pushes learners toward constant method changing. They start one routine, stop after a week, begin another course, collect more resources, and never remain with one form of practice long enough for adaptation to happen. Progress requires enough consistency for the brain to recognize patterns. Choose a simple system and stay with it. Continue listening to understandable English, speaking regularly, reviewing specific problems, and entering controlled pressure. Improvement comes from the quality of repetition, not the number of methods you collect. Your speaking identity becomes especially strong when you create proof through action. Statements alone are not enough. Every time you behave like a calm speaker, you strengthen the identity. When you pause instead of panicking, you create proof. When you explain a forgotten word, you create proof. When you ask for clarification, you create proof. When you contribute one idea during a group discussion, you create proof. Identity follows repeated behavior. You do not need to wait until you fully believe you are confident. Act according to the new identity in small ways, and belief will gradually follow. Say one more sentence. Ask one real question. Remain 5 seconds longer. Send the voice message without recording it repeatedly. These actions may seem small, but they tell your mind, this is what we do now. You must also create boundaries around correction. Feedback is valuable, but constant correction can return you to the identity of a frightened student. Choose moments for accuracy training and moments for communication. During a natural conversation, allow yourself to finish. Later, review 1 or 2 recurring problems. When another person corrects you in the middle of every sentence, your attention becomes divided and pressure increases. You begin monitoring yourself more intensely and speaking less naturally. A supportive teacher or partner should understand the purpose of the session. Sometimes the goal is improvement in a specific grammar pattern. Sometimes the goal is uninterrupted fluency. Both matter, but they should not constantly compete. You should also learn how to receive correction without turning it into emotional evidence. When someone says, "We usually say it this way," the information is not an attack, it is one adjustment. Thank them, repeat the correct form, and continue. Do not allow the correction to reopen every insecurity you have about English. At the same time, not every correction is equally important. Some people focus on personal preferences, regional differences, or tiny errors that do not affect communication. You do not need to carry every comment permanently. Prioritize patterns that appear often, create misunderstanding, or matter in your professional and social environment. Your calm identity should be flexible enough to handle different English speakers. You will meet people with different accents, speeds, cultural communication styles, and levels of patience. Some will understand you immediately, others may ask you to repeat. This variation does not mean your English level is changing from one conversation to another. Communication depends on both people. If someone does not understand you, do not immediately feel ashamed. Repeat the sentence more slowly, change the wording, or emphasize the important word. If you do not understand them, ask for clarification. This is collaboration, not failure. Many learners place native speakers in a position of authority and become nervous simply because of the label native. They assume every native speaker is judging grammar, noticing pronunciation, and expecting advanced language. In reality, native speakers vary widely in communication skill, patience, vocabulary, and familiarity with international accents. Some may be easy to understand, while others are difficult even for other native speakers. Do not give another person's language background the power to erase your identity. They are not an examiner unless you are actually taking an examination. They are a human being communicating with another human being. Your English does not become less valuable because their English developed naturally from childhood. You have developed a skill through conscious effort, and that deserves respect. Speaking a second language is not an embarrassing imitation of native ability. It is an expansion of your ability to connect with the world. The calm speaker also accepts their accent. You can continue improving pronunciation for clarity, but you do not need to erase every sign of your background before speaking with confidence. An accent is not a grammar mistake. It is the sound of one language history meeting another. The goal of pronunciation should be understandable, comfortable communication. If certain sounds repeatedly create confusion, train them. If word stress makes your message difficult to follow, improve it. But do not turn pronunciation practice into rejection of your voice. Many learners speak too quietly because they are ashamed of their accent. This makes them harder to understand, which then creates more pressure. Speak with enough volume, slow down slightly, and finish your words. Clarity often improves more through confidence and pacing than through attempting to copy every detail of another accent. Your natural voice should not be treated as an obstacle. It should become the vehicle of your ideas. Over time, pronunciation will improve. But you deserve to communicate now, not only after reaching an imagined perfect sound. Another part of identity is speaking with ownership. Nervous learners often weaken every opinion with phrases such as maybe, I am not sure, or perhaps I am wrong, even when they understand the subject. These phrases can be useful when genuine uncertainty exists, but overusing them makes the speaker sound disconnected from their own ideas. You can express an opinion clearly while remaining respectful. Say, I believe the main issue is, from my experience, or my view is slightly different. Confidence does not require aggression. It requires allowing your message to exist without apologizing for it. This is especially important in professional environments. Your ideas may be valuable even when your English is not the strongest in the room. Do not wait until every sentence is perfect before contributing. Prepare the main point, state it clearly, and provide one reason. Your perspective can influence decisions, solve problems, and help others. Silence may protect you from making a language mistake, but it may also hide expertise, creativity, and experience. The cost of silence is sometimes much greater than the cost of an imperfect sentence. You should remember that English is not your intelligence. It is one system through which intelligence can be expressed. When the system becomes slow under pressure, your knowledge has not disappeared. You may understand a topic deeply but need more time to express it in a second language. Give yourself that time. Do not allow fast speakers to make you feel unintelligent. Speed is only one feature of communication. A thoughtful, well-structured answer can be more valuable than a rapid response. You can say, "Give me a moment to organize my thoughts." This is not weakness, it is control. Your new identity also needs resilience after rejection or misunderstanding. There may be moments when someone responds impatiently, laughs, interrupts, or behaves disrespectfully. It is tempting to carry that experience as proof that speaking English is dangerous. But another person's poor behavior does not define your ability. Some listeners lack patience. Some people behave badly in every language. You should learn from useful communication problems, but you do not need to accept humiliation as feedback. Protect your progress from people who make you feel ashamed for learning. Choose environments that challenge you without destroying your willingness to continue. Confidence grows faster around people who respond to meaning, allow thinking time, and offer correction respectfully. As your strength increases, you will become better able to handle difficult listeners without carrying their reactions into every future conversation. A pressure-resistant speaker understands that every conversation has its own conditions. A difficult experience after a stressful day does not mean you have lost your progress. Being tired, distracted, emotional, or unfamiliar with the topic can affect access to language. Native language communication also becomes harder under these conditions. Do not create permanent conclusions from temporary states. Say, "My English felt less available today because I was tired," rather than, "I have become worse." This keeps the experience accurate and prevents unnecessary fear. There will be good speaking days and difficult speaking days. Progress is not the elimination of variation. It is the strengthening of your average ability and your recovery when performance falls below that average. One of the clearest signs of growth is that a bad conversation no longer destroys the next one. In the past, one difficult experience may have caused days of avoidance. As your identity strengthens, you review what happened, make one adjustment, and return to speaking. The mistake becomes information instead of a verdict. This ability to return is more important than never failing. Every long-term learner experiences disappointment. The difference between those who continue and those who remain stuck is not talent. It is the ability to recover emotionally. You should develop a simple post-conversation reset. First, name one thing you communicated successfully. Second, identify one specific challenge. Third, choose one small practice for next time. Then close the experience. Do not continue replaying it throughout the day. Suppose you struggled during a meeting. You may say, "I explained the main problem clearly. I became disorganized when someone interrupted me. Before the next meeting, I will practice returning phrases such as, 'coming back to my main point.' This creates growth without self-destruction." The final stage of the English pressure reset is becoming less interested in how you appear and more committed to what you contribute. When the desire to communicate becomes stronger than the desire to protect your image, English begins opening naturally. You stop asking, "Did I sound fluent?" after every sentence. You begin asking, "Did they understand the idea?" You stop trying to hide every pause. You start using pauses to think. You stop avoiding difficult subjects. You begin using simple language to enter them. Eventually, conversations become less about English and more about life. You discuss work, family, goals, problems, humor, culture, technology, memories, and plans. The language becomes transparent because your attention moves through it toward meaning. This is the destination, not perfect English, but English that no longer stands between you and the world. English that allows your personality to appear. English that carries your ideas even when pressure is present. English that does not need permission from perfection. You will know the reset is working when you begin noticing small changes. You answer before creating the entire sentence. You forget a word and describe it without panic. You ask someone to repeat a question without feeling embarrassed. You hear yourself make a mistake, but your attention remains on the story. You enter a group conversation earlier instead of waiting for the perfect opening. These moments may not feel dramatic, but they represent deep transformation. Your nervous system is learning that speaking does not require emergency. Your mind is learning that uncertainty can be managed. Your identity is learning that you are someone who stays. The old version of you believed pressure had the power to erase English. The new version understands that pressure can make access slower, but it cannot remove what has been learned. The old version interpreted silence as failure. The new version uses silence as thinking space. The old version believed one mistake could destroy the listener's opinion. The new version knows that communication is larger than one sentence. You are not trying to become fearless. Fearlessness is unnecessary. You are becoming reliable. You are becoming someone who can trust themselves when the moment is real. Reliability means knowing that you can begin even when the answer is incomplete. It means knowing that you can simplify when vocabulary disappears. It means knowing that you can ask for help, correct yourself, return to the main point, and finish the conversation. This kind of confidence is stronger than excitement or motivation because it is built from skill. Motivation may change from day to day. A trained response remains available even when you are tired, nervous, or uncertain. Continue practicing until calm behaviors become automatic. Practice breathing before important answers. Practice one clear opening. Practice describing missing words. Practice asking for clarification. Practice returning after interruption. Practice ending answers with a clear main point. At first, these actions may require conscious effort. Over time, they become part of your speaking personality. The mind no longer needs to search for a solution because it has repeated the solution many times. Remember that automatic English is created through repetition under realistic conditions. The sentences you practice only while reading may disappear under pressure. The skills you practice while slightly nervous become available when pressure rises. Continue climbing your speaking ladder. Do not remain forever in comfortable practice. Move gradually toward real people, unexpected questions, group discussions, phone calls, presentations, and important conversations. Each level expands the territory where your English feels available. Do not rush the process or compare your ladder with someone else's. One learner may feel comfortable in groups but fear phone calls. Another may speak confidently about work but struggle in social conversations. Build evidence in the environments that matter to your life. Your goal is not to become confident in an imaginary future. Your goal is to become 1% more available in the next real moment. One calmer breath, one clearer sentence, one successful recovery, and one conversation you did not avoid. These small victories accumulate. One day you may enter an interview and realize that although your heart is beating quickly, your mind is still open. You may speak during a meeting and notice that you are focused on the problem instead of your grammar. You may talk with a stranger and later realize that you forgot to be afraid. That is how transformation often appears, not as a dramatic announcement, but as the quiet absence of an old limitation. The conversation that once felt like a test begins feeling like an exchange. The listener who once seemed like a judge becomes another person. The silence that once felt unbearable becomes manageable. The mistake that once destroyed your confidence becomes a small correction. Eventually, you stop describing yourself as someone who knows English but cannot speak it. You become someone who uses English imperfectly but courageously in the situations where it matters. Your voice will not always sound exactly as you imagined. Some answers will still be simpler than the thoughts inside your mind. Some conversations will still challenge you, but the difference is that difficulty will no longer decide your identity. You will understand that a pressured performance is one moment, not the truth about your ability. You will know how to return to yourself. You will stop waiting for English to feel effortless before allowing it to become useful. Never forget what this entire journey has revealed. Your English was never completely erased. Pressure narrowed the path between knowledge and speech. Fear filled that path with judgment, perfectionism, self-monitoring, and the desire to escape. Every chapter of this audiobook has helped you remove one part of that blockage. You learned that the problem was not always a lack of knowledge, but temporary difficulty accessing knowledge under pressure. You learned to stop treating conversations like examinations. You recognized how excessive self-monitoring divides attention. You discovered that perfection prevents participation, that recovery matters more than avoiding every mistake, and that confidence must be trained under controlled pressure. Now, the final lesson is to carry these skills as part of who you are. You are not a learner waiting for permission to speak. You are a communicator who is still improving. You are not someone whose English disappears forever under pressure. You are someone who knows how to bring it back. You are not required to speak without nervousness. You are capable of speaking through nervousness. You do not need the perfect sentence. You need one honest sentence that creates the next one. From this point forward, enter conversations with a new agreement. You will not abandon yourself because a word disappears. You will not insult your progress because your grammar becomes imperfect. You will not allow another person's speed to decide your intelligence. You will not treat a pause as proof that you have failed. You will breathe. You will listen. You will simplify. You will communicate one clear idea. And when pressure interrupts, you will recover. This is the speaker your English has been waiting for. Not a flawless speaker, not a fearless speaker, but a calm, flexible, resilient speaker who understands that communication is too important to be controlled by perfection. Your mind may still remember the old fear for some time. Let it remember. You do not need to fight every thought. You only need to stop obeying it. When the thought says, "You are going to freeze," begin with one sentence. When it says, "That mistake sounded terrible," continue with the next idea. When it says, "They are judging you," return your attention to the message. Every time your behavior becomes stronger than the fear, the old identity loses power. There will come a day when the change feels natural. You will not need to remind yourself of every technique. You will simply respond, pause, clarify, and continue. Pressure will become one small part of the experience instead of the force controlling the entire experience. Until that day, practice patiently. Speak before you feel completely ready. Accept simple language. Respect your progress. Choose real communication over imaginary perfection. Create evidence through action. Your English has spent enough time waiting inside your mind while fear controlled the doorway. The doorway is open now. Step into the conversation. Let the first sentence be imperfect. Let your voice shake if it needs to. Let the words arrive one at a time. You do not need to reveal your entire English ability in one moment. You only need to remain present long enough for it to return. That is calmness. That is confidence. That is fluency under pressure. And that is the final transformation of the English pressure reset. You have now reached the end of the English pressure reset, but the real change begins in the next conversation you enter. It begins when someone asks you a question unexpectedly, when your heartbeat becomes faster, when the words arrive more slowly than you hoped, and when the old fear tries to convince you that your English is disappearing again. That moment will be your opportunity to remember everything you have learned here. You will not need to produce a perfect answer, impress the listener, or prove your entire English level in one conversation. You will only need to remain present, take one calm breath, and begin with the clearest sentence available to you. For a long time, you may have believed that your silence meant weakness, your pauses meant failure, and your mistakes revealed that you were not ready. You may have blamed your vocabulary, your grammar, your accent, or your intelligence, even though the real problem was often the pressure surrounding your knowledge. You knew more than you could access, but fear stood between your thoughts and your voice. It made you rush when you needed time, remain silent when you had something valuable to say, and search for perfect English when simple English could have carried the message beautifully. Now you understand that your mind going blank does not mean your English has vanished. It means your attention has become crowded by fear, self-monitoring, judgment, and the desire to avoid embarrassment. You also understand that pressure does not need to disappear before you speak. You can feel nervous and still communicate. You can forget a word and still explain the idea. You can begin a sentence badly and still rebuild it. You can misunderstand someone and still ask for clarification. You can make a mistake without allowing that mistake to decide the rest of the conversation. This is the confidence you should carry forward, not the fragile confidence that depends on flawless grammar, perfect pronunciation, prepared questions, and comfortable listeners, but the stronger confidence that comes from knowing you can recover. Real confidence is not the promise that nothing will go wrong. Real confidence is the knowledge that when something goes wrong, you will not abandon yourself. You will pause, simplify, correct what matters, and continue. The next time your mind becomes empty, do not attack it. Give it space. The next time a word disappears, do not stop the entire idea. Describe the meaning. The next time you make a grammar mistake, do not carry it into every sentence that follows. Correct it if necessary and let it end. The next time another person speaks too quickly, do not pretend to understand. Ask them to repeat the important part. These are not the actions of a weak learner. They are the actions of a flexible communicator who understands that successful conversation is created through adjustment, not perfection. Remember that the world is not waiting for your English to become flawless. It is waiting for your ideas, your experiences, your questions, your knowledge, your humor, your personality, and your voice. Every time you remain silent because you fear one imperfect sentence, the world loses something that only you could have contributed. Your English does not need to sound like someone else's English before it becomes valuable. It only needs to carry your meaning clearly enough to reach another human being. There will still be difficult days. Some conversations will move quickly. Some listeners will be harder to understand. Some questions will surprise you, and some answers will sound much better in your mind after the moment has already passed. Do not allow these experiences to convince you that nothing has changed. Progress is not the complete disappearance of difficulty. Progress is the way you respond when difficulty returns. In the past, one blank moment may have ended the conversation. Now you know how to stay. In the past, one mistake may have destroyed your confidence for the rest of the day. Now you know how to learn from it and move forward. In the past, pressure may have controlled your behavior. Now it is only a feeling, and feelings do not have to become commands. Continue training your English where real communication happens. Speak with people, send voice messages, answer unexpected questions, join discussions, make phone calls, contribute during meetings, and allow your English to exist outside private practice. Do not wait for complete readiness, because readiness grows through participation. Every real conversation will teach you something that silent study cannot teach. Every pause you survive will make the next pause less frightening. Every recovery will strengthen your trust in yourself. Every completed conversation will become evidence that pressure can interrupt your English, but it cannot erase it. When you review your progress, be fair. Do not remember only the word you forgot. Remember the message you completed. Do not focus only on the sentence that broke. Remember the moment you rebuilt it. Do not judge yourself only by the discomfort you felt. Notice the courage it required to remain in the conversation while that discomfort was present. Your confidence will grow when your memory begins collecting victories with the same attention it once gave to failures. You are no longer someone who knows English only when nobody is listening. You are becoming someone who can carry English into real situations, even when the moment is important, uncertain, or emotionally uncomfortable. Your voice may still shake occasionally, but it will no longer disappear so easily. Your sentences may still contain mistakes, but they will continue carrying meaning. Your mind may still need time, but you will stop treating that time as evidence of weakness. From this moment forward, make one promise to yourself. You will never again allow one imperfect sentence to silence everything you know. You will not leave the conversation simply because pressure has entered it. You will not apologize for being a learner. You will not wait for fear to give you permission to speak. You will breathe, begin, and allow your English to return one sentence at a time. Your English is not hiding because it is weak. It has been waiting for a calmer mind, a kinder inner voice, and a speaker willing to continue without demanding perfection. That speaker is no longer someone you are waiting to become. That speaker is being built every time you choose communication over fear, clarity over performance, and continuation over surrender. So when the next real conversation begins, do not ask yourself whether your English will disappear. Remind yourself that even if pressure arrives, you know the way back. You know how to slow down. You know how to simplify. You know how to recover. You know how to stay. Pressure may enter the room, but it no longer owns your voice. Your English is still there. Now speak.